6:30. Today is February 20th, 2018, and we do have a quorum. All directors are present. And this is the Trophy Club Municipal Utility District number 1 meeting. I call to order the meeting, and first I'd like to thank Steve for signing up and congratulate you on the position. And the other two candidates, Mark and Kelly, I believe. Is that right? Okay. Okay, citizens' comment. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the board on any matter, whether or not it is posted on the agenda. The board is not permitted to take action on or discuss any presentations made to the board at this time concerning an item not listed on the agenda. The board will hear presentations on specific agenda items prior to the board addressing those items. You may speak up to 3 minutes or the time determined by the president or presiding officer. Do we have any citizens?
No.
Okay, you can go and sign up.
No.
I mean, if you just come up and then fill one out later, just say your name and your address, please. And you have 3 minutes. Go.
My name is Kelly Garza. This is my husband.
Kelly, if you'll pull those mics down in front of you, it'll
okay.
pick your voice up a lot better.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Roel Garza.
Okay.
So we wanted to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. We're residents of 556 Indian Creek Drive. We're here today to provide our position on something that impacts our property with the street development project, with the sidewalk development project. We have a very large Bradford pear tree that's directly in line with the construction that will be upcoming. And we understand that there's 2 options with the tree. That is A, either to keep the tree and route the sidewalk around the tree towards the curbside, which we understand that also impacts the water irrigation. That's why we're here to speak to you today. We understand that that provides, or with the keeping of the tree, there's some water irrigation that has to burrow underneath the tree, which is a financial impact to the town as well. Or B is to remove the tree. And we understand that then there would be no impact to the water irrigation with our property. So we had considered both options with the tree. We were not aware of these 2 options until earlier this week, so that's why we're here to speak to you today. Our position is that instead of having to incur additional finances with keeping the tree, our proposal would be to remove the tree and to provide up to a $500 credit for our property to replace the tree. We find that the tree provides a lot of shade to our property in the summer and helps to reduce energy expenses during the summer. And because it is such a large tree, it would be a huge impact to our property with removing the tree. But we also understand with keeping the tree, there's also a huge financial impact to the overall town and expenses. So our position would be to remove the tree and provide up to a $500 credit.
Okay, at this time, the board cannot go back and have discussion with you. Mm-hmm. We're just listening. That agenda item is coming up the first regular session. So if you wait maybe a little more than 5 minutes, we can have at least a question and answer.
Sure.
And back and forth. Is that okay?
Yeah, yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
No.
Okay, we're going to move into regular session, item number 1, consent agenda. All matters listed as consent agenda are considered to be routine by the Board of Directors and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. 1, consider and take appropriate action to approve the consent agenda. A, January 2018 check register. B, January 16, 2018 regular meeting minutes. And C, January 24th, 2018 special meeting minutes. Personally, I'd like to remove the January 16th one. Does anyone have, that's B. Does anyone else have anything?
I'd like to remove C.
Okay, we have B and C being removed. Anybody have any problem with the check register? Anyone?
No.
Okay, does someone want to make a motion for A, January 2018 check register?
I move to approve consent agenda item A.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose and a second by Director Thomas. All in favor? Unanimous? All opposed? I see none. Okay. We'll address B first. That was January 16th, 2018. There was a motion made by Vice President Wilson, and it had the amount.
What page of the minutes are you on, Kevin?
Excuse me?
Which page in the minutes are you on?
Let's see. I looked at the, well, if you click on the minutes, it's on regarding,
Do you have the agenda item?
excuse me?
Agenda item number?
Look, I think it was number 10. It was,
Well, it starts
ba-
on, it's page 12 in your packet.
it was based on the VACCON truck.
Okay, let me find it.
On which one, Kevin?
Let's see, VACCON.
It's on page 14.
It's number
Starts on
7.
14 and goes
Yeah.
into 15.
Yeah, number 7.
Thanks.
It's page 14.
Got it.
It goes into 15.
So that's it.
I know. Okay, everybody on that page?
Yep.
Okay, it says, let's see, Director Wilson and second by Director Rose, 2018. And it says, execute agreement not to exceed 358,640. Well, on the tape at mark 2 hours, 25 minutes, 46 seconds. Vice President Wilson made not to exceed, I believe the total, what was it, it wasn't that amount. It was like 492 or something like that. 392. It was the amount of the bond, the total payout.
Okay, in order to continue, we would have to have the exact number to amend the minutes at this time, so
Okay,
we can just
hold
pull
on.
those off, bring them
No.
back at the next meeting?
No, I got the exact minutes. Okay. It's 392, 280, 31. That's why I gave the mark at the tape, so I should go back and listen.
So that is the correct number?
That's what he made a motion for. 392, 280, 31.
So you're just saying the minutes need to be amended for that amount?
Right, for the correct amount.
Okay.
Okay? And that was the only thing I saw. So with that change, you know, I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
That's-
Move to amend the minutes to make that amount?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by myself, a second by Secretary Treasurer Rose. Is that correct, or?
I don't recall, so I'll
Okay.
take your word for it.
Everybody understand? Yeah, that's right. Okay, everybody understand?
Yep.
Okay. I have a motion, I have a second to change it to not to exceed 392, 280.31. Okay? All in favor, show of hands. Okay, unanimous, all opposed, I see none, okay. Vice President Wilson, you want to address C, as in January 24th, 2018.
I just wanted to pull it out because I wasn't here, so I didn't want to vote on it because I wasn't here to verify that it was accurate.
I need to clarify the last motion. I think the motion was to amend the minutes,
Right.
and we haven't voted to adopt them. Did you want to do that at this point?
Sure.
Okay.
I thought we were amending,
Okay.
okay, that's fine.
Move to approve the minutes as amended from January 16th, 2018.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor, show of hands. Unanimous, all opposed, none. Did we have to do that, Tony, since we approved them?
It worked fine. I
Okay.
think it could have been done with one motion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to pull those because you weren't here?
Because I wasn't here, so I didn't want to vote on it to approve it since I
Well,
wasn't here to verify.
There, maybe this will change your mind, but there's no vote because it was a tie, and we're going to go over the same thing.
No, I meant on the minutes.
Okay. That's fine. So you want to table those?
Well, I wanted to pull it out because I didn't want to vote on it because I wasn't here. I pulled it out so you four could
Okay, I
vote on
understand.
it.
Okay, I
I
understand.
I went through the minutes, they look clean to me, so I would make a motion we approve them.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a second by Director Rose, a motion by Director Thomas, Secretary Treasurer Rose, correct that? Okay.
I have an
Anyone have any
amendment.
discussion? Excuse me?
I have an amendment.
Okay.
If you go to page 17 of the packet, last paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
5 lines down. Bore should be B-O-R-E.
Yeah.
And the other question, and then on the next page, top of the next page, we've got a recap, said for Thomas, Rose Thomas, opposed Carr Hayes, absent Wilson. Motion would have failed 2-2. One would be an abstention or wasn't an abstention, so I'd like to correct that to 2-2-0. And then in the next one, the new motion, and I did not go review the tape. And so I'm going to count on my fellow directors on this one. The new motion was made by Director Carr. And in that vote, I remembered that being a split vote 2-2.
That's
also.
correct.
And so what I would like to do, okay, and I remember, I think we can agree that President Carr and Director Hayes voted for, and myself and Director Thomas voted against. And so I would like to amend that particular section to say for Carr and Hayes, opposed Rose and Thomas, absent Wilson, motion failed 2-2.
To 0.
2-2-0.
Those are good catches, Bill.
Good.
If
Okay,
with-
does anyone have any problem with that?
Can I second those changes? I think they're.
Sure, and we'll vote on changes.
Okay, we have a request for amendment as stated by Secretary Treasurer Rose, and then seconded by Director Thomas. Does anyone have any further discussion? You remember those, right? Okay. Anything else? Okay, we'll vote on the amendment. All in favor? Show of hands. Okay, we have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, and myself. All opposed?
Abstain?
Okay, we have an abstention by Vice President Wilson. It's 401, and it passes. Okay.
Move to approve the minutes as amended from January 24th, 2018.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the January 24th, 2018 minutes as amended. All in favor, show of hands. Okay, all opposed? None, all abstended? Okay, same thing. Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, and myself for, and Vice President Wilson will abstain. Okay. I apologize, took more than 5 minutes. Okay. Item agenda 2, consider and take appropriate action regarding water system capital improvement projects. A, consider and take appropriate action regarding approval of bid for construction of water improvements for Indian Creek, Fair Green Drive to Meadowbrook Lane, and Phoenix Drive, Pebble Beach, Shields Drive, and award of contract of 2018-01-2401 as part of fiscal year 2018 capital improvement projects. And B, consider and take appropriate action regarding approval of bid and award of contract number 2018-02-2001 for valve replacements as part of the FY 2018 capital improvement projects. This is where you go, Tom.
Good evening.
Can we have her speak real, like,
Oh,
get involved, if you don't mind?
That's your pleasure.
Okay.
You bet.
Okay, you can
Sir.
come up, Ms. Garza, and we can talk to you now. Okay, your concern, just to recap, is the Bradford Pear that's in the easement, and instead of boring, you were fine with accepting or a $500, I guess, fee to plant a new tree. Is that correct?
Right, and beyond that, I mean, the $500 fee to replace the tree, I mean, for that size of a tree. Now, installation of the tree is another thing, so I don't know what the town plans with the construction project, but would also propose that the fee to replace the tree and installation be included in that.
Okay, and you're aware that anything in the easement can be taken out?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And it's not, we're not liable to pay. We can if the board decides it, but
Right.
our intention, the town's policy is anything in the easement gets taken out and it's up to the resident. Okay?
Correct, right.
So, okay, does anyone,
I would have a question. Do you want to put back into the easement because a future board at a future time could say, the first time when they moved in, it's likely that they were not aware, and so it would make sense to do it. But now that they know it's in the easement, the
Right.
decision could be different. So would you want it to be in the exact same location?
No, outside
Or would
of
you
the
want it-
easement.
You want it
Yes.
outside the
Mhm.
easement? Thank
So we
you.
don't have any issues.
just to clarify, that when you buy a house and sign off on a title, you're signing off on a survey too?
Correct.
That shows the easements around your whole property? Okay,
Correct. We've lived in the house for 1 year, so
Right.
we're aware of that.
okay.
Okay, so I just need to be clear about, you said $500. Does the $500, in other words, if the board says, okay, $500 to the Garzas, then do you take care of the tree, or is that something that you want us to take care of? In other words, planting it, that type stuff, or, I mean, not to advertise a local nursery, you go down, buy a tree, and if it's over, I think, $250, they'll plant it for you.
Right, I mean, I think it certainly depends on the cost of the tree and the cost of the installation. I have not had enough time to go out and research the cost of installation. I know we have installed previous trees, and I know that they typically package the cost of the tree with the installation. From my memory from about 10 years ago, I think it was up around $500. We can certainly try to get a bid and understand that, but we're here today to speak, and so I think $500. We would take care of the installation. We would not expect the town to do that,
Okay.
but the cost to do the tree and the install.
I just want to be clear here too, because you say town. The town is another entity.
Right, we
We're
just-
we deal with the water line. The sidewalk will belong to the town, that issue. And I think they'll probably straighten the sidewalk if we take the tree out, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just understood this week that there was two impacts. Previously, we were not aware that there was an additional component to the water
Yeah.
impact.
Okay, yeah. We've got the line, we're digging the hole.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is, I understand that Councilman Schaffner, visited you, and he asked you, or recommended that you ask for possible money for the tree, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, he's my neighbor, so,
Yeah. Yep.
okay.
Yeah, and we've been trying to get feedback on the tree and, what are the potential options and what were the potential plans with the tree. So I became aware of it this week. Yeah.
Okay,
You know that that particular tree, a pear tree, is a 20-year tree, basically. So I would keep that in mind when you shop for a tree.
Oh, yes, we would not replace it with the Bradford pear.
It's a very fast-growing tree, but doesn't live very long.
What's that?
It's a very fast-growing tree, but
Right.
it does not live very long.
Right. I grew up in the house next door, so I'm very familiar with the property and the trees that have been there and the ones that have been removed, so.
Well, I mean, when you come to selecting a tree, I mean, if you go on, I'm sure on the town's website somewhere, they talk about trees and ideal trees. So, I mean, it's about a page list. And so, I mean, and there are other places you can go to determine the type of tree you want, so.
okay. Did you have
Quick-
anything else, or did any other directors?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick comment for the board, and I'm not sure where you're going with this, but the district can't simply write a check to a private party. That would be an unconstitutional donation. You obviously have the authority, if you decide in connection with your project, to replant a tree, as long as you have the appropriate rights. But if you do decide to enter into some type of arrangement with the property owners, there needs to be a contract to ensure that the public purpose is achieved, and you need to specify what that public purpose is, so it's not just a gratuitous donation of public monies. So something to keep in mind in connection with your deliberation.
In addition to that, the liability of giving them money to, I guess, they're gonna take care of planting it, but as far as putting it on, planting trees on personal
If the
property.
board's desire is to go forward with some type of payment, we can come back and structure some type of agreement for your consideration, which addresses that, addresses maintenance, has some type of public purpose that has to be achieved for you to spend money. Or, you know, another option obviously would be for you to do nothing and it's up to the property owner to put in their own tree. Or you could install, on the district's cost, a replacement tree within an easement or right-of-way, which you have that discretion to do as part of the public project here. But I think what's being proposed is installation of a tree on private property, which is different. You don't have that authority to do that without an easement.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we're gonna go through a presentation, and we'll decide on the
Okay.
actions we're gonna go. Do we have someone else that wanted to speak?
I just have some questions.
Sure. If you don't mind, fill out a form after you talk. Just need to know your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Brittany McGinnis, 219 Phoenix Drive. So we got a call from, or an email from Mr. Carmen. My husband talked to him on Friday, was it? Yeah, it was Friday. So we're just learning about this as well. So we were just curious what our options are, what's happening, when it's happening, how long it's going to take, what else is going to be affected besides the huge oak tree on our property. And it's the only oak tree on our front yard. So just would like to hear more about, in addition to what this family had to say.
Yeah, the long and short of it is, it's in the easement, just like their tree is. And technically, if you're allowed to put something there, but if it comes in to play, if we have to replace a water line or the town has to do a street repair, which I believe your oak tree actually penetrates the curb.
It probably penetrates
Right.
a lot. It's
Right, and underneath the street.
It's
So
big.
it would come into play with the town. And the ruling is, and it can be changed, is that if it's in the easement, it can be taken out, you know, and we don't have any obligation to replace it.
Okay,
That's what the easement is for.
right.
They go along the side of your house, on the back of your house. You can't put buildings in there or things like that. So that's, go ahead.
So let me ask you the question, since you have the biggest tree
Yes.
in the project,
Okay.
okay? And it is a live oak. Are you also amenable to having us remove the tree if we provide, through some sort of arrangement that the attorney may be able to come up with, a funding mechanism so that you could have another tree put on your property?
I believe so. So I think that's, I wanted to get clarity on what you was just said. It would have to go back in the easement, or unless some. It's
So, as
complicated.
I understand the board's consideration tonight is it will be decided, as a result of removing some trees that are required to be removed to accomplish the water project, it will decide whether to replace a tree, whether the district would do so within its easement or right-of-way, or whether it would enter into some type of arrangement with the property owners where the district would provide payment, and then it would be up to the property owner to purchase and install its own tree. So as I understand it, that's what the board will be considering tonight. If they make the latter decision, my point to the board previously was you just can't simply write a check to a private party without any type of controls. You must make a finding that it serves a public purpose, and there has to be an agreement in place to make sure that public purpose is achieved.
Okay. Yeah, I think.
What would be a legitimate public purpose?
I think he's gonna tell us that soon.
First, I want to see what your decision is, then we'll
Yeah, probably the next board meeting though, right? Because our agenda item tonight is really for the underlying contract to do the pipe work. And I would add, it's actually not an irrigation line. It's an 8 or a 10, or maybe even a 12-inch diameter drinking water supply line. The smaller irrigation lines do come off of that after it's gone through your meter, but it's a very large line. So we're talking, a foot in diameter, 3 feet down. It's going to be a pretty good sized trench, and it's going to be messy and probably have some, just negative construction related impacts to your own enjoyment of your property. But when we're done, you'll have a new facility that should last at least 50 to 100 years. So that's the hope.
Carmen, the pipes are physically roughly how many feet off the curb?
The easement, as
Oh, no, not these,
Director Carr
in the
said,
ground, how
well,
far off?
it varies depending on where you're at. So in this particular case, the oak tree is very large. It's not clear to me that the curb didn't get built around the oak tree.
It was there first, yeah.
So before the subdivision even was created, our water line went in the back, but now, the tree has gotten much larger, probably 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And there's really no way to replace that line in the 10-foot easement without killing the tree. I mean, we're gonna kill it when we cut off half of its roots. That's part of the deal.
Well, that was kind of where I was headed. I was out there looking at all of these today. That tree is literally 1 foot off the curb. You're not gonna do anything there without taking that tree down.
Well,
There's
and
just nothing
it
you
does
can do.
appear to be.
Now, the other spot, the reason I'm asking the question is those oak trees are about 10 feet off the curb. I mean, that Bradford Fair is about 10 feet off the curb. And the question is, can you, the root structure on Bradford pears are kind of weird. They don't necessarily do a finger. They can kind of go like this. I've dug several of them out. And the question becomes is that root structure such that we could replace the pipe without having to take that tree out?
It's unlikely, and in fact, just digging the trench is likely to take those out. I've spoken with the lady named Veronica, whose last name I cannot pronounce, who lives at 1 Green Hill Trail. She's very aware of her trees being at risk here. Those trees are right on the edge of the easement by my estimation. I mean, they're set back a little farther than some of the others, and Tom is going to address that in his presentation. So our engineer is actually going to get up here in a minute and kind of walk through. He's got some pictures of the trees, and will be able to help us answer at least the construction side of that question. Ms. Veronica went and talked to an arborist, if I'm saying that correctly. Arborist, a tree expert, somebody who knows about that. I'm a lowly engineer. I don't know nothing about those trees. So I like trees, but I know that we're going to have an impact. Her arborist said if they cut off the roots that far away cleanly and put tar on them, there's a chance they'll survive. I mean, that was kind of what she explained to me. So that's a third-person account, had to do with her smaller trees that were farther away from where the pipeline is going in the ground. So that's about all I can contribute to this dialogue in terms of tree health and those kind of things.
But unfortunately, I think the way this motion is presented, we don't really even have an option of taking any action on really addressing the tree issue at all.
No, we're addressing approving the contract and then with the bore or without the bore.
And direction to the staff, if there's going to be some sort of agreement that addresses public purpose, to bring back to the next board meeting a facility or an arrangement to deal with this.
Or I think another option would be, which eliminates kind of the public purpose issue, if the board wanted to replace a tree within the right-of-way, within the easement, it could ask the engineer to obtain a change order, and after the trench work is done and when they're restoring the surface of the ground, to plant a tree. And that way it'd be on the district.
Although it does create the same problem again in the future.
But hopefully,
50 years
I think
from now.
we'll all be gone by then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we do, put new grass back down where the grass was. We do, where it has to cross your driveway, they do repair your driveway.
Sprinkler system?
Excuse me?
Sprinkler system?
Oh, yes.
Okay. We also had a question. We have a unique mailbox.
I see.
They take the mailbox down.
Will they put it back up?
Yeah, they take photos of
think
it,
the
they try to
city-
reconstruct it
Okay.
exactly the way it is.
Okay.
The goal is to make you whole.
It's part of, the character of the house, so. I think our biggest thing was that tree's the only tree in our front yard. So because of how large it is and beautiful it is, just decreasing property values, so.
I tell you, I went out there and almost cried, because I don't
Yeah,
know
that's
how
where
they're
they
gonna,
are, yeah.
how they're gonna fix that street without that tree
Trying to
coming
remember
down.
which.
I mean, if you tried to bore under it, I believe you're probably gonna hit the
It's actually
taproot,
around from
and
me,
that's gonna
so-
kill it.
Yeah, the blue's the
Okay.
water line.
We
That's not
understand
We're gonna have some
that
pictures here in a minute.
is likely to happen even if we tried to salvage it. It's just we wanted to understand what the opportunities are for
Okay.
discussion, so.
Anybody have anything else? Okay, Tom.
I have something about somebody said it wasn't on the agenda to discuss the trees this week or this month. I thought we said at the last meeting, let's defer this item until the next meeting.
That's correct, but approval of an agreement that defines public purpose outside the easement that allowed us to pay for the replacement of a tree is not on this agenda. That's my point.
You can approve boring under it, Jim. That's part of the thing, but you can't approve replacing it.
You can approve cutting it down, can you not?
You can approve cutting it, you can approve the project, which would include taking the tree down. And if we told the engineer that we wanted to replace the tree within the easement.
Well, you're talking about the replacement is not on tonight's agenda.
If we wanted to replace it outside of the easement, that's not on the agenda. If we want to replace it inside the easement, that would just be a change order by the engineer to accommodate that.
To come back at a later time. Not tonight.
Well, ultimately, the hole is not going to be dug for weeks, right? We're still a long ways out. In fact, we haven't even had our public hearing, which I guess is scheduled for the 1st of March, so that all the property owners who are either directly impacted, like our folks here, or even those that live way down Indian Creek who are going to be affected by construction-related traffic impacts. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that if you can't get your garbage can out to the curb, that's a problem. And there's challenges that come along with this type of a project in that regard. So that public hearing, which is now, as I understand it, scheduled for the 1st of March, will invite all the neighbors to consider the broad range of construction impacts. What was brought to you last time that was tabled was this project, the base project, our participation in it as a part of the town's street and sidewalk project. And it had that additive alternative, which the staff did not recommend. That was the staff's position. We do not recommend that we spend $9,000 a tree to bore under them because we shouldn't have to, really. I mean, it's in the easement, and that's the way it was structured. So I think to bring back something that mitigates the concerns, and these folks have expressed understanding of that, as did Ms. Veronica, we would need to bring back something else that's in the contract form. I would not be in favor of putting a tree back in the easement. I mean, I think you're creating the same problem for a future group. And if it comes back that we have to say, well, give us a 2 square foot additional easement and a property description adjacent to our easement, and we just move it to the edge, so that it is in fact in our easement as a part of that transaction, then we could just do it. But that's just going to require another action of the board next month, which will be before construction even starts, would be my guess.
Okay, did you have some?
Yeah, so I understand that replacement of the trees was not part of this agenda item, but that is negotiation as far as the action items or the decisions that are taking place today. So if a decision is made to approve the boring based on keeping the tree versus if you do not bore because we're proposing to remove the tree, I think that impacts your decision making too.
Yes, I think if they decide to award a contract, which includes the alternate bid item for boring, then I think your request becomes moot because the tree will remain.
Right.
If they choose not to award the alternate bid so the tree is removed, then the board will consider whether or not to replace a tree in the right of way or enter into some type of agreement or do neither.
Right. And then I don't know what the financials are with boring versus not boring, but if we're talking about $50,000 versus a $500 replacement, I think that helps to also.
Well, it's 36,000 and some change to bore.
Okay, 36,000 versus.
It's opening, if you, and again, the board will discuss this at another meeting to, whether they're going to reimburse you or pay for X amount of dollars or something on a tree. But it comes down to, if it's in the easement, we don't pay for it. If it was a town, they'd probably do the same thing. They wouldn't pay for any tree. They would vote on it like we would do. But this agenda item specifically addresses the contract, right, and with or without the boring. It doesn't say, okay, we'll award you $250, $500, or whatever for a tree.
Understood, but the decision was 2-2 last time. and a decision to move forward with a contract bid that has a significant financial impact when we're here to negotiate a very negligible amount for replacing a tree that provides property value and shade for our property, and hopefully energy efficiency here in about 10 years, I think is a reasonable proposal to put forward to the board.
And I think the only thing is, ma'am, unfortunately, we're restricted to what's on the agenda. If the contract is approved to not bore and remove the tree, then the motion to how to work with the homeowners would have to come in a subsequent meeting.
Right, and this input, I think, is helping to provide input to decision-making at this point of the process.
Well, appreciate you coming by.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you, we appreciate that.
Okay, Tom, you're up. Did you have something, Bill?
Well, there are only 3 properties involved with trees. We have heard 2 of the property owners speak, and as I understand it, offer to take $500 for a tree that we can look forward to doing that. My other question is, the general manager had mentioned conversation with the property owner at One Green Hill. Give me a sense of what's going on there so that when I get to the point to vote, I know how I'm going to vote.
In her case, she was very open. I talked to an arborist.
The tree guy.
The tree guy.
I've been to an arboretum, right? So I'm fouling up the pronunciation. My apologies. She was, being proactive about how can we do the construction since her trees are set farther back from the easement, and save the trees. So in that case, the sort of person who would work in an arboretum had recommended that if depending on where that trench is, if they have to cut a few roots, they might be able to trim the top of the tree a little bit, cut the roots cleanly, and save the tree. It wouldn't necessarily die in the first place. So her focus was really on, how can we
Save the tree.
get past those without,
Okay.
a big impact on the construction side. And she was understanding of both the exorbitant costs associated with boring under a couple trees. That, this is a couple of pieces of pipe over 2 streets, $400,000 project, but if we bore under it, that's almost 9% of project costs. It's in my view, and I said it in the last meeting, I think it's an inequitable motion of money from one ratepayer to another. And I think we just need to be reasonable about that impact. I am not opposed to working out a deal to provide a tree replacement. We are just now beginning pipeline replacements. I think there have been a couple of these projects before with the town, but we're not like Chicago where the average age of pipe is 100 years old. The average age of pipe in Trophy Club is less than 40. And so we're just now getting to a place where we're going to start pipeline replacements. And what we do here today and over the next few months will set precedent for the future. I think there's no question about that.
I'll let Tom go, and then I have a question for him.
Good deal. All right. So what I did tonight, because the last board meeting, I felt like I didn't do you guys good justice by having a lot of information. I didn't anticipate the discussion. In anticipation of tonight, I did forward to John and to Mike an email with the breakdown of the bore costs for each property and an exhibit. So I've just taken that exhibit and put that up here. So this is the overall of Indian Creek. This is the Bradford pear up here, and then these are the trees that are down here. So looking at the Bradford pear, we kind of already talked about that. The water line, pretty much for the most part, is 5 feet off the back of the curb. That's been our standard, I think, for the most part, isn't it, Mike? Somewhere in that area, 5 to 6 feet.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So that's generally where we try to put it in there. And so in this case, it goes right through the middle of the Bradford pear. So what I did, because I wasn't sure if everybody got to look at the trees, I put project. We walked the sites before we ever start. We photograph everything. So this is the tree right here that's under question, and so you get a kind of an idea there, and the water line would run pretty much right through that area where the tree is. So this is the one where the Bradford pear is located. The one at Green Hill Trail, which is still in question, is the one that is off of Indian Creek. These are the trees. The reason the bore is so long was, and I'll say this, we actually put a little more bore in there than what we think we would hope we'd have to have, but because of the cost and where the bore pit goes, you've got an initial bore pit and a receiving pit. And so we do have that. I did give that information to John when we there wanted to be forthcoming in that we were a little conservative with that. What happens, especially on this one, is there are franchise utilities in here, which is what made it difficult. We were out there with Mike. We had everything pin flagged and marked up so we could see there's an Atmos gas line and there's also telephone in there. And it all happens to be in the area between the curb and where the water line is. And that's what really creates a problem for us about moving the water line for that. So again,
Mr. Rutledge, one quick question
Yes, sir.
on that.
Yes, sir.
So in a boring, how far down would the pipe be?
Well, we would still try to keep the bore the same depth as the water line, which is 42 inches of cover. It's just that the pit becomes pretty large and it would be wider than the trench.
Okay, so you're not pushing it farther down and putting the pipe in a place where it's harder to maintain?
No, sir, we would not. Unless there was some reason to. In this case, we don't anticipate going any deeper than your standard there.
What is the standard depth?
42 inches of cover, yes, sir. Now, and let me say this. In this case here, I do need to retract that. This is a 12-inch water line, and so we're going 5 feet of cover there, 60 inches. On the lines where we get up to 12 and larger, we go 5 feet deep cover because of the size of the line. On the one that we'll get to in Phoenix, an 8-inch line, standard's 42 inches or 3.5 feet of cover. So that's this red is the length of the bore, and we thought we could come back in here. It's just there's franchise utilities right in here, so that's why we lengthened it, and those can be negotiated. So I took pictures of this. These are generally the trees right here that are in question. At the time I walked this, I didn't have all of the dig tests had not marked all the franchise, but all the franchise guys are all right in here. And so these are the two main trees. This one was kind of in question, but these are the two main trees right here where the water line would be in conflict there. Because of the franchise stuff here, that's what make that
Tom,
difficult.
is the big tree on the other side of the driveway affected?
So go back to this, so you can see that they're pulled back further, and they're more on the right-of-way line there. So they're not. No, sir. You would have a receiving pit in here, in this area, and we'd have to work with the contractor to not impact those, but they're not in play. Those are not. So that's what that looks like for you right there.
We talked about the other lines out there, and I was out there the other day and marked. I noticed a lot of flags down through there.
Yes, sir.
Do you think we can lean left enough to save those trees?
Well, so what's going to happen, in looking at it, and I know Mike and I looked at it, the way everything's been pointed out, when you get in there with a backhoe, and he's in there with a pretty good piece of equipment, and that trench for the 12-inch line is going to be somewhere around 30 inches wide.
Oh.
And so, because he's got to get in there with a 12-inch pipe, and then that doesn't include the outside diameter of the pipe, and then you're at least 6 inches on each side to get compaction around the trench and get your backfill in there, you're there. And so that's what makes it difficult. And then running that track hole along there, that's why for us, looking at it up front, it just looks like they're in harm's way.
And,
So-
and I think those are post oaks, and they don't like.
These in here, Bill, I think these are cedar elms, but
They're not
That's-
post oaks.
Oh, they're not posts?
they're what we had. That's what they look like. And I think a post oak. I don't think these are post oaks. I think
Okay.
they're cedar elms. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Which I know they're a little tougher tree, but
I
they're
know
just,
post oaks won't tolerate you getting near them.
yeah, they don't like people at all.
Okay, okay.
And Tom, if you just look at the drawing, I mean, that's the side of the street the walkway's gonna be on, is it not?
I'm sorry?
Isn't there gonna be a concrete walkway on that side?
There's a
of
sidewalk there.
it? If you look at that distance, that walkway, that tree closest to the driveway, that walkway is gonna be right up against it.
So, and what we have historically done and what we do, have done always in the town, the walkway location, and let's see, I don't know if I've got it on this water line. No, it's not showing on the water line plans, but I can show you here. So the walkway, what it is, it's 1 foot inside the right of way, and then it's 4 foot wide. So in this case, there, Jim, what would that look like, sorry, would be if we get in here too close, then in a lot of these cases, we pull that sidewalk over when we have obstructions like this, which the one with the Bradford pear, that's the one, if you looked at the plans, we were kind of whoop-de-doing that around a little bit. So we would scoot that sidewalk over
Closer to
to
the
avoid,
curb.
yes, sir. And then when we get clear of the trees, then we'd come back in the traditional location of that.
On 556, you were going on the backside to Bradford Pear, correct?
No, we were gonna come in the front. We were still gonna come in the front there. It was just, we were gonna have to swing it around there a little bit. So we were going between the tree and the curb. We were gonna pull the
Gonna
sidewalk
reduce
closer.
it down to 1 foot or whatever you said?
Yeah, to get
There's
it,
enough
to
room
get
to do
around
that.
it. That's right.
It'd be tight with the curb, but there's enough.
So that's what you see there on Indian Creek. So when then we get to Phoenix Drive there, and I spelled Phoenix Drive, spelled Drive wrong again. I apologize. That's kind of
Right on
embarrassing.
the curb.
So this is the location of that tree that's right here on Phoenix, and as you can see, it just runs right through the middle of this. This is an 8-inch line, but the trench work and all the things that happen is essentially the same. Even if it's smaller pipe, it's not going to be really any different. And so you can see that just with the location of this, there's just no way to get around this tree whatsoever. I mean, as everybody can see here in the photographs, as you get up in here, that the root system, you couldn't even get a backhoe to get under the tree. We couldn't get a water line in here. I mean, you're going to literally tear this tree up no matter what you do.
Where was the town gonna put their sidewalk?
On Phoenix, there are no sidewalks.
Okay.
The only sidewalks that the town has are on the thoroughfares.
Indian Creek, okay.
Yes, sir. Indian Creek Trophy Club Drive, but not any of the residential streets, fortunately. So that's what this situation looks like, and as you know, back up, you can see what that.
It looks like that's,
If you look at the position of that tree, Kevin, the thing that scares me is, even if you try to bore underneath it, if you hit that taproot, you're gonna kill that thing.
well, it's underneath the street, so it's gonna kill the roots when they do the street and the curb for sure.
That's
I mean, that
that's
one
right.
root goes right in the curb and it's cracking it.
Yeah, there's no guarantee that that's right, that the tree, that there would not be an issue with that. That is right. So that's what those look like. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and I'm here to answer questions, follow John's lead on anything you guys want me to answer to help you out to make a decision.
You said that you had separate bids for each location?
Well, no, Bill, let me say it this way. What we have is we have one alternate bid, which is in there, which is that total amount that's in there, which is the on Trophy Club. I'm sorry, in Indian Creek Drive, it's $29,290, and then on Indian Creek, it is $7,275. The Indian Creek bore, we broke it down because that's a unit price contract, so it's by linear foot. And so you pay for whatever the length of the bore is. So Indian Creek, it covers 2 areas, but it is 1 unit price, but it is cost per foot.
Okay, you mentioned Indian Creek twice. You meant Phoenix, I believe, on the other one.
Okay,
The
correct.
29,000.
That's right.
Whatever is Indian Creek.
That's right.
And then what was Phoenix again?
And Phoenix is $7,275. And let me say this too, because I told the board at the last meeting that we were here discussing this, that I talked to the contractor. I had 3 conversations with the contractor on this back and forth to try to see if there was a way for him to renegotiate his price, and he just would not come down from that. So the price that we have is, that he has bid, is what is here.
But it's by linear foot,
It is by linear foot.
the
yes.
$202 per linear foot.
Yeah, it actually is a little bit, on Indian Creek, it is $202 per linear foot. On Phoenix, it is $242.50 per linear foot. And his justification for that was, I've got a much shorter bore on Phoenix, but I've got he's got all of his setup and equipment, and therefore the unit price cost.
So
was
it's 36,000 to bore. What is it to cut them down?
So, the removal of a 24-inch tree is $1,700, and the removal of 12-inch tree is $860.
So it's 2,500 versus 36,000.
And you will have more than one tree, but we bid those per each, is what we did.
Okay, because on Phoenix here, I believe it's Phoenix, and this is on page 24 of the agenda package. It looks like you have, to remove the trees, is a 6 to 12 is 1,400,
That's right.
and then 13 to 24 is 3,300. Is that right? That's
C119,
19 and
C120.
20.
So C120, I've got price per each is $1,700 per each tree.
Are you seeing that?
No, I don't see
Yeah,
that.
I don't see that either. I'm seeing,
On your, are you looking at the
That's the
bid
wrong
tab?
bid tab. That's not for the one that we were looking at. You gotta come up to quality excavation up on about 22.
on which page?
I'm on page 22.
Oh, wait a minute.
That's still
What,
Phoenix.
what
That's
number
still
is it? C,
Phoenix.
there's C2, C1.
But that- wait a minute,
C1 dash
Okay, I see
19
where
and
you
C.
could, it's C19 and 20,
Yes, sir.
and it's 860 and 1,700, is that
Yeah.
correct? Is that what you said?
That is correct.
Okay, and that's Phoenix? Or-
That
no,
is
that's
Indian,
Indian Creek.
that is Indian Creek.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
page 20.
That's correct.
Page 20 is 202.
It's on page 20 and 21.
And,
Yeah.
and then the one on
22,
Phoenix
excuse
is $934. Why that one's cheaper, I don't know. But that's just his bid.
Mike, I got a question for you on the fire hydrants that are on here. On the one, you have 3, and then I think there's 2 on Phoenix, is that right? Or is it vice versa?
I don't know what's on there.
Phoenix,
Phoenix, there probably is 3 on Phoenix.
right. And then on Indian Creek, there were 2, I believe. Let me go back here.
I'm sorry, well, I was looking.
Fire
at-
hydrants.
Fire
I don't think
hydrants.
we're adding
You have
any
fire
on.
hydrant assembly with 6-inch gate valve. That's replacing the hydrant?
It's replacing
It
the
is.
hydrant.
That's
Okay, and if the hydrant's on the other side of the road, you go under the road to connect it, or?
The hydrants are always just on the water side of the road. Unless,
On Phoenix,
unless-
there's 2 hydrants and stuff.
and they're
On Indian
both
Creek, there's 0.
correct.
So how come this is in the bid?
Okay, I think we added a hydrant on Phoenix
We
because
did,
there
we,
was so much spacing in between them.
correct.
There's one by 556, I think, or somewhere in that area at the top of the hill,
On Indian Creek or on
or in
Phoenix?
Phoenix.
Oh, yes.
And
there
then
is.
there's one at the bottom by the cul-de-sac.
That's right. So we added, when we walked it with Mike, what we saw is that the fire hydrant spacing didn't meet fire code and the space so far apart. So what we did is we added a fire hydrant and we respaced them, and we put one fire hydrant at the top of the hill, which also acts as an air relief for you to help maintain that line. And then we moved those others to get them distributed so we could have the fire,
Okay, so
fire
there's
space.
one down at the base, at the cul-de-sac,
Correct.
and then there's one at the top already, pretty much.
Close, yeah.
It's like pretty
Yep,
close to the top.
yep.
And then where's the third one going? At the beginning?
It goes to the beginning at the
At
other
Pebble
end.
Beach and?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then Indian Creek, there's not a hydrant on that side of the road. There's one on,
I think it's the crossing
Crestwood.
on the side streets is where we're replacing those.
so that's on the other
hydrants.
side of the road,
Well, it's because on the 12-inch line,
right?
at every street intersection, there are lines that do cross Indian Creek right now.
That's why I asked, do you cross over?
Well, that's because there's a line there.
Right.
But we're not running a fire hydrant lead across. I think that's what Mike was trying to say, is we're not having an independent fire hydrant lead go across Indian Creek and just set a fire hydrant. It's at the intersections where the fire hydrants are, and in this case, an 8-inch comes off the 12 to go down the side streets, and there's a fire hydrant right there at those corners.
Okay, that's the one that's across the street. Then there's one
I think
on
it's
Fairgreen, I believe.
I think it's Crestwood and Fairgreen.
I think that's right. I've got the plans if I need
Yeah,
to look at it
it
for
is.
you.
It's Crestwood is on the opposite side,
Yep.
at the corner, the north west or corner. Then on the, I mean, she lives right across from it and stuff. And then there's one on Fairgreen on the corner, on the south
Yeah.
corner.
Okay.
So, okay. Another, you have a page in here that doesn't apply to us. It's the last page. Yeah, it says Crowley.
Oh, sorry.
It was in the
On the,
one
on the
before.
bid tab?
Yeah, it's on page 27.
Okay.
It says
On
client, City
20,
of Crowley.
on the bid tab number?
Bid tabulation report. It's on our agenda 27.
Okay. That probably got copied in there from a separate bid tab. Okay.
Okay. Director, Secretary Treasurer Rose.
What, Tom, what's the bore distance on One Green Hill Trail?
Okay. On One Green Hill Trail, that bore length is 105 feet.
Okay, thank you.
And like I said, I mean, that is very conservative when you look at what we have there, in that here's the trees, it's the bore pit, and I think we might be able to put that bore pit in here if we decided we were going to do this. But in getting clear of all this, we went ahead, since we were boring, we did move it back. But in talking to the contractor, we would look to shorten that bore up, if that's what you guys decided you wanted to do.
I noticed on these bids, the quality, their bonds, I mean, those bonds went all over the place. It's bonds and insurance. And one was like, quality was 63.15, and then one was like 20,000 or something, or 15,000.
Yeah.
What's,
And here's what happens. All contractors do this. As I've learned this over the 40 years or so that I've done this.
so you just start now?
Contractors put their money in certain places, and the reason that you'll see them put money in that, on some of them do anyway, quality didn't, but some of them do, they'll load it up on the front where some of their profit is, so their first draw will be the bonds, and that's how they'll tend to do that.
Yeah, hydrant costs were all over the place too.
That's right.
I mean, 5,000 or 6,000 difference.
And it depends on a contractor. If he's got a yard, sometimes he'll buy in bulk gate valves and fire hydrants, and he'll store them in a warehouse when prices go down, and so they'll stock up, and that helps them be competitive with pipe and all that.
Okay, to sum it up, we're looking at 426,022.50 without the bore. Does that sound right?
Correct.
And then with the bore is, let's see,
36.
what was it, 36,000?
$36,565.
36,565 even? Okay. And what's the total between, if you had 426,
462, 587.50.
465, what?
462.
You'll find those numbers on page 18 of your packet
At
from the
50?
previous,
Is that 50 you said?
18, Bill.
yeah, page 18, on the previous meeting's motions.
Yeah, I saw that, but just want to make sure nothing changed. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Tom?
If I could, just one kind of summation on that. John mentioned this, but just for clarity for everyone and for the residents are here. So the way as we look to move forward, if whatever the board decides tonight, I did talk to the contractor today. just to confirm his schedule, the way things are set up, to make sure that he's on board with everything. We're looking to have a pre-construction meeting on February the 27th with the contractor. That will include the MUD staff and the town staff. As John had mentioned, there's a public citizens meeting, and I think the town, what they've done is they tend to put door hangers on all of those and then put it on their website. So we're counting on them to do that, and that is on March the 1st, Thursday, March the 1st. The exact time will be set. It'll be in the evening to allow folks to attend that after dinner. And then the anticipated notice to proceed is March the 12th after that public citizens meeting. And the idea there was to give citizens plenty of time for them to be able to make whatever arrangements they felt for their inconvenience there. The contractor bid 360 days to substantially complete the work. That would make this substantially complete on March the 7th, 2019. And then there's 60 days in there to do punch work for us to punch it. And in your case, we always walk with Mike and go through and do a punch list, and then he has time to do that. The way we set this contract up is so that we don't have a bunch of stuff torn up. We have the contractor do one street at a time. So he moves in, he'll do Phoenix first and get that done. And then once he's got the water line replacement and any storm drain work done, then he'll move into doing the street work. When he's done there, then he moves over to Indian Creek. We kind of learned this many years ago with you guys when we started doing this. If we turned a contractor loose on several streets, he would tear one up, do the water line, and leave the street torn up. And he'd come back months later, and it really created issues for the residents. So we go from one street to the other, making sure he's first complete, and then on Phoenix, and then he'll move to Indian Creek. We'll get a full schedule for him. And as construction works along, as we've always worked well with Mike on this, we're involved through all the construction. We'll have regular meetings with the contractor. We'll have a full schedule on all those things, and we'll work with your staff as the construction goes along. And if Mike ever needs us to, we can always come to the board and report any updates for you as well.
Just to clarify, the 360 day that you mentioned is for the full project, water lines and streets, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, our water lines aren't going to take that long.
It will not.
Yeah.
And we can, well, technically, and so what happens with that, Kevin, is because with the water line, the pipe work and the chlorination and all that with the water line and all that is certainly going to come first. But he can't set all the final valve boxes until the meter boxes until the streets are complete. So in essence, your contract does stretch over a longer period of time because he'll do the pipe work first and all that. We get all that new street put in and the sidewalks, and then the last thing he does, or one of the last things he does, is sets the meter boxes to grade. So there is a little bit of work that gets done on the backside of all that.
And you're going to use those high reading meters, right, Mike?
What's that?
Those high reading meters?
I don't think we're going to do any meter replacements in this,
Yeah, okay.
but the good thing about that is we'll have that water line in there for almost a year, and our warranty's not going to start till we accept it at the end.
That's right.
Okay, Carmen?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the McGinnises, I think she's still here. That does not mean, you sequenced it, right? So the water work and then the road work on Phoenix is going to get done, and then they're going to go to Indian Creek. So they're not facing 360 days of trench in the front yard.
That's right.
Okay.
And that was my point. And if I make that clear, thank you for making that, John. That is the intent of doing this, is to minimize the interruption of the citizens. And for those folks that are here tonight, what we do, and I know some of the, some of the MUD board members have attended these as well. We'll be there with my team and everyone that needs to be there, and we'll explain the whole project and the process, things about, things like trash and mail, people's driveways and all of those things. And so we'll be there that night on March the 1st to explain the whole process. We'll have the contractor there as well so that he can explain how he's going to do things. So that's why in our schedule we have the pre-construction meeting on February 27th ahead of the public citizens meeting, so we can meet with the contractor in advance of that to make sure he's on board with what we're trying to do.
Do you have something, Jim?
Yes, I want to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we approve the water improvements to Indian Creek Drive and Phoenix Drive and award contract number 2018012401 to Quality Evacuation for an amount not to exceed $426,022.50 as part of our fiscal year 2018 capital improvement projects. And if I get a second, I'll explain.
Okay, you mentioned award it to Quality Evacuate.
I'm sorry?
You mentioned that the bid was awarded to the company, Quality Evacuation.
He did not.
Yeah, you need to mention that, because we're awarding the bid to a contractor for that amount.
What amount did he say?
Wasn't that the contractor he recommended previously?
It's a new motion. The other one didn't pass, so the
426.
bid is being awarded to Quality Excavation Ltd. Is that correct, Tom?
That is correct.
Okay, so if you
That's
just
what
add that to your motion.
That's what I put in the motion. I just read it. I said to
Fine, it's in there
quality-
now.
I said to
Okay.
Quality Excavation for an amount not to exceed $422,022.50.
Okay.
And if I get a second, there's three reasons for the motion. I'll explain them.
Okay, I have a motion by Director Thomas to award the bid for $426,022.50 to Quality Excavation Ltd.
I'll second.
Who second?
I did.
Okay, we have Secretary Treasurer Rose second. Okay, any discussion?
Yeah, let me give my three explanations. I don't want to bore for several reasons. Number one, there's no guarantee we're not going to kill those trees if we bore. Number two, my big reason is we then take out of your hands any opportunity to come back and say, let's talk more about some kind of replacement. And I want you to have that opportunity to do that. And number three, I do feel, Carmen, I do feel that you and Tom Class have got to hold some discussions on this. The money, it comes from the citizens of Trophy Club, whether it's paid for by the town or paid for by the MUD. But this project was not initiated by the MUD. We're putting this pipe in the ground because the town is putting in new streets. So I think the conversation you need to have with Tom is who should pay for this, town or the MUD? Because I think it's a question mark.
And my comment to that, to me, that's an unnecessary irritant. If it's $500 for each homeowner for a tree, it's $1,500. There's no sense of irritating people about having which pocket we're going to take the $1,500 out of, one pocket or the other.
Yeah.
That's
I think
not-
that just goes more toward
Okay.
creating more public discord.
And that's not a
I agree with you, but we're talking trees again, and this is the motion based on the bid.
And Greg,
I do
that's
agree
not,
with you.
that's not something you go in front of the citizens and say, we're going to debate this. I think that Carmen and Tom Class will sit down and they can solve it between the two of them.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, Secretary Treasurer
Okay,
Rose.
I want to say, okay, for those that are here, I'm the guy that you'll find with his hands cuffed around a tree. So when I saw the big live oak tree, I went, oh man. And I appreciate your willingness because the property owner was gonna pretty well drive where I was at on this. I appreciate your willingness to negotiate a sum, offer a sum, to put a tree at a different location, or perhaps if we have to, we'll do that back in the easement. So I will tell you right now, I will commit to you that that is my intent, okay? Now, the third property owner said, and the arborist discussion was cut and paint roots, okay? If that's what the owner would like to do, and that's the impression I've gotten from the discussion so far, I'm willing to do that, okay? The other side of that equation is I strongly suspect it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, I want to allow that person the same opportunity that we have here. I mean, if those trees, we cut those roots and those trees die in a year, then I want them to understand that they come back and I will take their position at the board to do a similar type replacement for them for those 3 trees, okay? And so that's where I'm at, and I'm going to say that I've been driven by 2 of the 3 residents that are involved in the issue. Other than that, like I said, you'll find me with my arms wrapped around that live oak tree and handcuffed on NBC 5. So,
We can get the police to give you handcuffs if you want to. It's our
yeah,
problem.
so anyway.
But so, last meeting, you wanted the board, now you don't, right? Okay.
Because
Well, let's
we
vote
now,
and we'll
because we,
find out.
Okay. I just,
We haven't voted yet.
okay, we have a motion by Director Thomas. We have a second by Secretary Treasurer Rose. Any further discussion? I see none. All in favor of awarding the bid? Okay. Unanimous, all opposed? I see none. It passes, Tom. So, if you would, as most directors have said, I guess Carmen and, we'll get with you, I guess, and, see what we can do for the residents and stuff, and bring
Yeah,
that back.
whatever
to-
that needs to be, whatever your decision is. My immediate task right now is to, tomorrow, as I told the contractor today, now that I know your decision, I'm gonna finish up the contracts for him, get them couriered to him to get the bonds and insurance put together. And then we'll get to you, John, once he's got those executed, and get those over to you. so
Okay,
you
and
can-
I understand, Carmen, you're gonna be out of town for the March 1st meeting, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And-
I was previously scheduled to be out for the public
Okay.
hearing, but certainly we'll probably have Mike come and attend that on our behalf.
Sorry about that.
So I really appreciate y'all coming out. I'm committed to working with Tony to see what it takes to get this in writing, whether it's in the edge of the easement or whether it has to have a separate sort of agreement for doing work out of the easement where it's out of our jurisdiction, if you will. So
Okay.
we'll get her done.
And the residents, you all understand what's going on now? Okay.
Thank you.
And appreciate you doubling our population for attendance, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay,
it was easier than.
okay, moving on.
Quick clarification, does the board have any objections to your general manager executing the contract, or would you like it brought back to Kevin?
I'd like for him to do it. I don't want to sit there and spend another hour and a half talking about trees and everyone becoming a tree expert.
Do you need a motion? I mean, that's ordinarily included.
If
but I
there's
don't-
consensus there, we'll make sure that the board's action.
Okay, is the consensus that Carmen, you said he signed the contract
So
or
it's a-
decides on?
Award the bid, and the general manager will be authorized to execute the contract on
Yeah,
behalf of
the contract, not the trees discussion is coming back to the next agenda. Okay. So-
I'll do that in a motion. I move that the general manager be approved to accomplish the documentation and execute the contract number 2018012401. The
Second.
quality excavation.
Second, any discussion? I see none, all in favor, show of hands. It passes. Okay.
Thank you, Tony.
You were gonna raise your hand, I saw you move a little bit. Okay.
Had three fingers. I mean, you know,
Okay.
Boy Scout.
3, consider and take appropriate action to authorize staff to obtain bids for the construction of 16-inch water transmission line improvements from the water treatment plant to the town center.
I have a question if we do B.
B.
Yes, 2A and then 2B, the valves.
No, we have not
No,
done
we
B.
didn't do
I
the
missed
value,
that.
skipped it.
We didn't do B.
Very good, that's why you're here.
Yes, I've achieved my goal.
Yep, you're done for the night. Okay, 2B, consider and take appropriate action regarding approval of bid and award of contract number 2018-02-2001 for valve replacements as part of FY 2018 capital improvement projects.
So this money is budgeted for valve replacements as a part of the fiscal year 2018 capital improvement projects. We're just asking that, we can release this money for these projects.
Have a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the award of contract number 2018-02-2001 for valve replacement to Raymar Construction and authorize the general manager to take those appropriate actions required to execute it.
Can you
In
put
the
a
amount
dollar?
of, $49,997.62, not to exceed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose, and a second by Director Thomas. Is that the right amount, Mike, or nothing's changed, right?
Nothing's changed.
Okay. Any discussion? I see
I
none.
have one very quick item, and that is congratulations to the Water Department. That is $2.38 less than budgeted.
Well, we just saved 36,000 on not boring, right? So what's the
But
deal?
I'm impressed with the fact that the bid was so close to what we budgeted.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? I
Our
see
board
none.
is easily
All in
impressed.
favor? Okay, unanimous. All opposed? I see none. Okay, can we move on now to 3? Is that okay? All right.
Please do before we
Okay.
start talking about trees again.
Okay. 3, consider and take appropriate action to authorize staff to obtain bids for the construction of 16-inch water transmission line improvements from the water treatment plant to the town center. Staff report. Okay, PD 30 has been signed, correct?
PD 30 is been
Executed.
signed, and we're talking about providing water service just to the other side of the Trophy Club Road so that it's there in time for them to start going vertical. They really can't have fire protection on the site until we get that line in.
Okay.
So,
Motion. I move to direct the staff to obtain bids for construction of the 16-inch water line from the water treatment plant to town center and bring the bids back to the board of directors for selection of a contractor.
Okay, we have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose. Do I have a second? I'll second it. Any discussion? Everybody understands this is coming from the storage tank to the PD 30 side.
Pumps.
So this
Okay.
is just to make sure they have facilities.
Right, and
Yes.
it's just that part of the line.
So we
Comes,
started this almost 2 years ago.
right, and this
we
comes
just
back
sat
through
on
the
it.
church property
Mhm.
easement, which we've
Correct.
obtained.
They've already agreed to pick it up at that point and take it through their property.
Correct.
Right, okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? I see none, all in favor, show of hands. Unanimous, all opposed, I see none, okay. Moving on to number 4. Consider and take appropriate action regarding water system improvement projects. A, consider and take appropriate action regarding future needs for the additional groundwater storage tank and water line to support it. Thomas and Hayes. B, consider and take appropriate action regarding proposed construction of transmission line improvements from the water plant to the elevated tank located on T.W. King, including possible alternatives there too, Wilson Rose. Okay, that is now from the loop on PD 30 because we just voted on bringing the line to that property. Is that correct? So it's
Yes,
not
sir.
from the water plant anymore. It's from the loop.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to clarify. I know what you meant, but okay.
Mr. President, I have just a brief presentation acknowledging upfront my brevity impairment. I'll try to be a little bit briefer than the tree discussion. So, my agenda for this discussion is to have a review of fluid mechanics principles for you all. So we'll start with that. I think that's a good exercise. Then I want to address the question. So Director Thomas had basically asked a couple questions. One, are the improvements identified in the CPNY February 2016 report still necessary? Particularly the additional pipeline for capacity out to the Fort Worth delivery point. All told, about $16 million in improvements identified in that February 2016 report. And the additional ground storage tank, which would, based on the conceptual design, go where the old police facility is for the town here at the end of the parking lot. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the inherent assumptions in that study, and then answer the question. That was a question put to me as the general manager. Do I still think those are necessary? So let's go with that. Then I want to give you just a little update on water and wastewater planning, the engineering aspect of that, the principles and practices that we see as engineers, as well as my recommendations. All right, so here's the 3 things you need to know about water system design. Water flows downhill and it flows uphill to money. When I say it flows uphill to money, that means you got to pump it to push it up a hill, and that's letting it flow to money. when we design a pipeline, the inner diameter, the interior diameter, has to be smaller than the outside diameter. Otherwise, the hole is on the outside, and that's wholly unacceptable. And finally, we have to address the reality of the second law of thermodynamics, which basically says that you may not manufacture pigs by running the sausage grinder backwards. There's friction and entropy in the world. So here you go. So if we look at the first piece of this graph, it shows on the left-hand side, on the top, so the left-hand side of the top of these graphs, we see a valve that's closed, and we see a big reservoir over on the left-hand side. There's zero flow. And if you put little tubes up to the atmosphere right there, they will all come to the same horizontal line. That's called the hydraulic grade line. In the case of that valve being closed, it's straight across the board. So that makes sense, right? If you have a tube with water in it and you pull it like this, the water equalizes in the tube. That's pretty
If
straightforward.
the lines don't have any clogs in them.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And of course, it's a little different on the sewer side because generally the pipes are not full. If we go to the second graphic, we see that the valve has been opened, and if we look in those tubes, presuming they're clear plastic, you can look along and you can see that they steadily go down. That becomes the hydraulic grade line, and the difference in elevation between those two tubes is the friction loss of the water going through the tube. So you can measure it in terms of feet of head. We talk about that all the time, feet of head. If you imagine that this is the elevated storage tank on the left, or it's one of our ground storage tanks here, but there's a valve somewhere where the water is discharging into a sprinkler system, there's a hydraulic grade line, and that hydraulic grade line would be straight across the board again if there were no friction. So what you're seeing there is the friction of water flowing through the tubes. If you're like me and you have a little atherosclerosis, your tubes start to clog off a little bit, they get rougher, and the flow has more friction going through your arteries. Conceptually, you can create the same thing as an elevated storage tank. If you look at the last graphic, we're effectively creating a storage tank with a pump. So I know I had a discussion with one of our directors about, well, can't you just pump into the system instead of having a storage tank? Well, in fact, you can, but there needs to be a terminal storage, and the system has to be designed for that purpose. Our system was designed from day one to have terminal storage on the opposite end of the system and to pump to it. Okay. All right, so I pulled this stuff off of Google, and I just wanted to show you. If you look, let's see if you can see my cursor right here. If you look right here, there's a little white dot. I actually went down to road level, and this is what it looks like if you're down on the road, this upper left-hand picture. This is the Kaler tank. And so right now, there's someone sitting in the control room in Fort Worth, in downtown Fort Worth, really close to where I live, just on that would be the east side of the Trinity River where the old plant is. And they're watching the level of water in that tank. That's their output tank. From there is a line, and I'll be honest, I've seen it on a piece of paper. I forget what its actual route is, but it goes from that tank over to this place where there's an orange diagram right here. And if you look at that on Google Earth, this is a pumping operation that pumps water into Westlake. There was this question about whether or not Westlake has elevated storage. Mike informs me that Westlake does in fact have elevated storage, but it is jointly owned with Keller. So it's right on the boundary, and that's how they handle the pressurization of their system. So somehow the water comes from that little tank in the lower left-hand corner up past this facility. We just received the bids on a parallel for that line, whichever route it goes. And again, I've seen it on paper, but I'm not sure where. This is a part of the joint project between Fort Worth, Westlake, and Trophy Club Municipal Utility District. So that is carrying additional water from down here up to where this orange line ends. And then even beyond that, Mike in his discussions with Fort Worth, Wendy Chi, have acknowledged that they're responsible for getting water to right here, which is at the 170 and the 377 intersection. From there, it would be our responsibility to get it in, get it under the freeway, and get it up to our tanks. So that was another one of the big elements.
So Carmen, when they use the term Westlake's Vault, is that the intersection of 377 and?
No, it's this one right here. So that, you can see the inset picture. If you're kind of come out at an oblique angle, it's got a couple of ground storage tanks and a big pumping array, and that's how they pressurize their system in Westlake. They tap off of the same line that goes right by the orange line, but that's the line that's coming to us. So it comes in, it's a 21-incher beyond there, and it comes all the way to us.
That's our line.
Well,
Right,
we've paid money already to have the line run to their vault. My question is, where is their vault?
That's it, right there. So it's this facility right here.
Right.
And that indeed is the point. So if we're going to build, you can't phase capacity in a pipeline in the sense that you have to get from one end of the project to the other to make it work. We have already invested, I forget the exact number, the bids just came in. CP&Y is doing the design work for Fort Worth. We're partners. We went and borrowed money from SWERFT for that project. So we've already added additional capacity to go from like 3 million in capacity and change up to 10 million.
3.7.
On this line that comes from the end of the blue here in the corner up to the orange, right?
Bill, that cost us around 4 million, wasn't it?
Yeah, 4.4.
Yeah,
That's the old number.
Our
So
cost
the-
is right around 4 million.
So there's another pipeline, which would be all ours, so no joint project with Westlake or Fort Worth. It would be all our responsibility that would bring that water, additional capacity into the storage, ground storage tanks that we see up here in the upper right. And I've got an inset of those, so you can see our tankage, and in fact, we're sitting right here, right now, okay?
So
So-
Carmen, forgive me, but we've always talked about our cost, that 12, 13 something $million coming from Westlake's vault. But didn't you say a minute ago that somebody's going to build a pipe going from that vault up to 170?
It's my understanding that Fort Worth has acknowledged that our delivery point should be here at the intersection of 170 and 377, not back here. It's not clear to me that the project that was just bid out includes that stretch of pipe unless you've verified it.
I have not verified it, but I have had talks with Wendy about it. So,
Because my understanding was that the cost of, if we were to do this, our cost was going to be from that orange dot all the way up to our water vault.
Yeah, so that could be a swing of a little
No,
bit.
their vault to our vault.
Yeah.
But let's leave that for a moment. This is one of the pipeline segments that comes. Now think about it. Once it's pumped into this lower left-hand tank, the Kaler storage tank, there's a pipeline, and it comes all the way into our ground storage tanks by gravity. By gravity. So that's elevation of 2 tanks, some friction in that pipe coming all the way into our facility. There's head losses, all of those things. Okay, that's why we went through the little hydraulic
No
discussion.
pumps in there anyway.
No, not at this point. Now, conceptually, you could do that at some point in time and maybe use a smaller pipe with more energy, but generally speaking, we try to do things with the minimal amount of energy, and the energy's already been expended to push it into the Kaler tank. Now, one of the key things I want to tell you is that first piece that we're joint partners with Fort Worth and Westlake, has been bid out. It was a CP&Y design, and the bids came in significantly under the engineer's estimate. So I just want to make that point. And that's a fairly recent development. We're going to be bringing back some notions about what we can do with that, because we've already borrowed more money through SWERF than it's going to take at this point to pay for our share of that project.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what are the inherent assumptions in the CP&Y report that are relative? One is that there's limited room for growth within the Trophy Club Municipal Utility District Number 1 service area. Number 2, that the build-out population is 14,000. Number 3, that per capita water use will remain the same in the future as it is now. Number 4, the groundwater, which is now about 10% of the supply, will go away in the future. It's not really even contemplated in the study. And then finally, that the number of folks in Trophy Club per connection will go up. That's an artifact of the fact that they projected a demand and a population in town. They made some swags at what goes, let's say, on that piece of property on the other side of 114 that would be west of Davis, right? There's a piece of property in there, still in the district, not clear what that's going to be, and it's not even clear that we'll be serving that. There's been other developments on that side of the freeway that Westlake has chosen to have served by Westlake, not by us, likely at a higher expense to their folks. But these are the inherent assumptions in that study.
What
And
is 14,000, is that a town number?
it's the number in the study. So the 14,000 is the ultimate build-out population in the study. If you go and look in the town's CAFR for the last 4 years running, so say from 12 to 16 or 13 through 16, they start off with a number. In the CAFR, you know, in the management discussion analysis says we've got 12,122 people, whatever the number was. The next 2 years, the CAFR said we have about 12,000, and then in 2016, they actually had another number. All of which are estimates that are put into their CAFR, and that's the most recent number I've seen. I don't think we'll have an accurate number on population until the next census comes around. But these, I mean, the point being that that study is based on assumptions. So my recommendation is this. Is the interconnecting pipeline to the eastern tank, $2.4 million needed? Unequivocally, yes. We are already contractually obligated to build part of this pipeline capacity. In fact, you just approved putting it out to bid a moment ago. And I want you to take a look at your handouts. So, think about this drawing right here and my discussion of hydraulic grade lines and head. So, if we look at this graphic, we have our ground storage tanks here at the district. And we have our elevated storage tanks on each side of the town. They're shown as the east and west towers. We know that during the summertime, on peak flow days, we have trouble getting enough water into that eastern storage tank. And that is true today. It's not something that's going to happen in the future. It's true today. This line, this interconnecting line, is needed today. It's needed. And I tried to draw on here, so the red line I've penciled in myself before we made the copy, but effectively those pumps are creating the hydraulic grade line in the middle, that flat spot. And then the head losses on each side of the system result in a situation where we can't get enough water into that eastern tank. It's really because we have constrictions, right? You're going from a 12-inch line down to an 8, or it's 14, I'm sorry, down to a 10, to an 8. Those constrictions cause friction loss in the pipe and would result in the case where if we didn't close the valve on the pipe going into the eastern tank, it would sit and overflow. That's what it would do. If you look at the second graphic in this document, this graphic right here, which comes from Mike SCADA screen. I didn't bring my glasses. Mike, what date is this from?
August 16, 2015.
Okay. So if you look at the two top lines along the top, you see there's one line that goes flat. And during that period of time, all three pumps are running. There's another line that starts to dip. So if you look at the vertical line, that's giving us all three of these numbers from pump 4, pump 3, and pump number 1 are all running at that point in time. And we're still struggling to put water into that eastern storage tank, whereas the western one is full. So I'm here to tell you, based on my judgment, we need that line, and we need to proceed with it. Yep. That's my opinion. Is additional pipeline capacity to Fort Worth, the $16 million needed? Yes, based on the assumptions in the study, yes, it's still needed. We're already contractually obligated to build part of that line, which I talked about before. It's the part that comes from Kaler Tank to the place in Westlake. The other part is still outstanding. So I would add the codicil when we need that line is still an outstanding question. And finally, is the additional ground storage tank needed? Yes, based on the assumptions listed. We are already contracted, oops, I didn't mean to include that part. That's on the pipeline side. But let me tell you why I think that is also needed. It's an operational parameter. It's with the assumption that we would have 24 hours of storage on site if there's a problem, right? Some contractor hits our 21-inch line or the 21-inch line and the parallel line, and we're shut off. Well, guess what? We have a perfect example of that happening right now. We were just contacted by Fort Worth, who said, we've got a big line that's coming under the I-35. We need to lower that line. It's the one that serves from over to the Kaler tank. We need to lower that line several feet so that we can get a storm drain in on top of it. We need you to go on your stored water for 24 hours. So no water from Fort Worth during that period of time. The point of having that storage right over here is really for that. You know, how are we going to get through those periods of time? Adding the 3 million gallons that are, and $3 million, it's about $1 million a million gallons for storage, would provide us with a full day of storage at the ultimate build-out capacity shown in the study. This again leaves that question, when? Because right now, you know, our max day is not 10 million gallons a day. It's more down in the 5 or 6 range, okay? Finally, I do want to say this. I think that, you know, there's assumptions in that study that can be questioned. I mean, I can say, I think it's a bad assumption to say that per capita consumption is 287 gallons per capita a day, and that's never going to change. It's not true anywhere else I've worked. It's not true anywhere else I've worked. In the case of Fort Worth, they are going to sell less water this year than they sold in 1998 to their retail service area. Well, their retail service area has grown significantly since 1998, and that's a result of per capita consumption. So basically, they're treading water on total water supply. But it's because most of the new housing stock going in is very efficient. They have high efficiency washers and dryers. They have smaller outside irrigated spaces, you know, a lot of townhomes, places with smaller footprints. So in my view, if you say that those assumptions are accurate, the alternatives for infrastructure improvements that are identified in the report are valid, and I stand by that. Now, that said, I think there's an open question as to when you build the additional pipeline capacity out to where we pick it up from what Fort Worth is putting in right now, and when we build that additional ground storage tank. I think it's needed based on what it says in the report, and I think we ought to reserve the right to build that. I'm not going to recommend that we do it now. So I want you all to know that. I further recommend that every 5 years we should update planning studies both for water and wastewater. So that should be a regular part of our planning effort. That should include things like every year we should be going through and doing condition assessments on all of our assets and trying to incorporate that in the next year's 5-year CIP. That's important. So I wanted to give you just a little background on water resource planning. This graphic is from Seattle, and it shows a couple things. So the first thing is this line right here, dark blue one. When you look over here at the graphic, it says in 1970, the water demand there was 150, just a tad over 150 million gallons a day there in Seattle. And their plan showed that by the year 2000, they would be up over 350 million gallons per day. They redid that study to 10 years later, or 15 years later. So the next line is actually the 1980 water plan, so a little bit lower slope, but it still shows an increase in water usage in Seattle, which has been a fairly fast-growing area for many years. But it's like everyone else. We take the per capita consumption that we're seeing today and we multiply it by what we think our population growth is. And here's your magic target out on the horizon. This is what we do. And then when you look at their 1990 water plan, it's at a little different slope. But again, it's going up into the future as if, you know, those people are going to use the same amount per capita over that 20-year period as they did in the last 10 or 20 years. That's not usually a good assumption. And when you look at the green line here, that is the population in Seattle. This is Seattle proper for that period of time. The red line, in fact, reflects their actual water use. So they're using, in spite of all their population growth, less water today than they were using in 1975. And that's a fairly common thing, even in fast growth areas, because a lot of that growth is happening with more efficient assets. So I know most of you guys are too young to get this reference, but there's a great episode early in Lost in Space, which I enjoyed watching as a kid, where the evil Dr. Smith is caught taking a shower with the last 22 gallons of water left from their water generator, while the robot holds the hose and sings Figaro. It's a pretty interesting piece. If you ever get a chance, you can still see it on Hulu. You know, we're about planning, right? I mean, that's part of what we do. We're trying to say, where do we need to be 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now? So I want to share with you all that I went to Austin on Saturday. Got to see the South Lake Carroll boys win their 8th straight state swimming championship in 6A. That was good stuff. My son was a part of that team last year, and it was a good chance to see him. I decided not to pay the hotel room and come back, and as you all may or may not know, there's a lot of I-35 between, say, Temple and Waco. It's in the luge run, right? The signage is bad. It's hard to see where you are. There's not a lot of lights. And I was going to go to Buc-ee's. It was a little bit misty, but I like Buc-ee's. It's a good place to stop and get gas, and I knew I needed gas. And the next thing I know, I look over there, and there's Buc-ee's right there. So I must have missed the exit like 2 miles ago. So I started looking for that next gas station. I ran out of gas at 1:15 midnight on Sunday morning for the first time since Jimmy Carter was president. So that was a failure of planning on my part, but the first failure that I've had since the Carter administration. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions you all might have.
Okay, I have a number of questions. I have been, many have questioned why I've continuously voted against the line. And I've talked about some of the concerns, and I've also mentioned the cost. And I've heard a million times the cost is not in the CPNY study. Go to page 38, the cost is in the CPNY study. So my concern is all of those assumptions. I think many of those assumptions were made. The study is dated February 2016, but the numbers were from years prior to that. So when we look at what the study estimated and we look today, so we don't have to estimate, I think we find exactly what you said, which is this study dramatically overestimates the amount of water that we're going to use. And that's my issue. I think before we start making million-dollar decisions, we need to make these decisions based on real numbers, on accurate numbers. One of the things you said with both of your, I think we need these based on the assumptions. I think the assumptions are just via time is proven to be wrong. Therefore, if you base a decision on the wrong set of assumptions, you're going to get the wrong answer. I went back and looked at it. One of the things you mentioned was 2 pieces of land. If you're looking at the hydraulic study over in Westlake, there's 2 spots there where there's property, and like you said, it's not likely we're going to be servicing those areas. We talk about the town population. There was a document in January of 2017 that showed there was about, from the North Texas Council of Governors showed Trophy Club population's about 11,000. Let's say for giggles and grand, that number is somewhere between 11,500, 12,000. It's a far cry from the 14,000. And that drives the people per connection. Trophy Club, according to the study, when the study was done, was sitting at about 2.15 people per connection. The study is based on 2.7, which again overestimates the usage. We go to table 1, which is the population demand and connections projection. The future shows 14,000 people and 6,034 connections. Well, we're sitting at, based on the numbers that's in the past that Mike provided in the packet, 4,716 connections, and we have, from what I've been told by the town, less than 60 lots left. And in PD 30, you have 34 townhomes and roughly 250 apartments. Those numbers do not come anywhere near 6,000 connections. So I think that's a 25% overestimation in the number of connections, which is going to lead you to dramatically overestimate the amount of usage that you have. The study on page 4 also indicates that lawn watering is a significant part of the water usage. When we look at future growth, it's going to be high-density apartments, those things. Well, in apartment complexes, you're not talking about building houses, so that water usage is going to be less because you don't have that many new homes with sprinkler systems. So your water usage is going to be lower. We get over, I'm looking at the monthly water report. In 2011 was our peak time. We pumped 980,000 gallons, 980 million gallons in 2011, and we had about 3,600 connections. At the end of 2017, we pumped 950 million gallons, and our number of connections is at 1,700. So we've had a 33% increase in connections and a 5% reduction in the amount of water that we've used, which is consistent with your statement that we overestimate the amount of water usage, and as our population has gone up 33%, the actual amount of water we actually pump has actually gone down. In this study, you also mentioned that the wells are not anticipated to be used as part of long-term planning. For what I've been told, they're estimated to no longer be in use after 2022. In my 2 years on the board, I've never heard that statement justified. Matter of fact, I've never heard that statement up until I looked at this study. So I question where that came from and why is it in the
That groundwater is going to be used over surface water?
that the wells that we have that provides 10% of water will no longer be available after 2022.
Well, I mean, with the TRA and, I mean, all the conferences are all saying that they're going away from groundwater. Is that correct?
It is correct, and the state has put together groundwater planning organizations. We're a member of one, and we pay them a fee for managing the groundwater levels and sharing amongst each other. But in fact, the last version of the statewide water plan, which addresses Trophy Club's usage going forward, suggests that we're going to be off wells in 2022. They are getting ready to update that study, and I just received an email, and I haven't responded to it yet, but Friesen Nichols is the planning engineer for the Region C water plan, and a few others, I believe, but certainly the Region C, which incorporates all of our area here in the DFW, asking if, in fact, we are still going to get off groundwater in 2022. Our application to TCEQ for permission to borrow money reflects the fact that we're going to quit using groundwater by 2022. Our SWIRF funds have that same thing in the preamble. Part of the reason we're borrowing money is that our groundwater is going away. It's written in as a justification. In my mind, it's the same thing whether you're talking about a water plant. I'll give you an example. When I came to Fort Worth, they had about $1 billion 10-year infrastructure improvement plan that included, over a 10-year period, a major upgrade to the Eagle Mountain water plant that supplies water for us. every year that plant gets put off a little more, because even though it's identified in the plan as being needed in the future, it wasn't needed, so you can push it out on the time scale. The fact that your plan calls for it in the future doesn't mean you want to build it before it's time, right? I mean, it makes no sense to build capacity before you need it. But that preamble statement has been in a variety of places, and it currently exists in the Regency Water Plan, that we're going to be off groundwater. They're getting ready to update that, and they're asking if we're going to stand by that and get off it in 2022. Conceptually, there's a couple reasons why you would. One is that it runs out, so in concept, if the groundwater went below your wellhead, you'd be sucking air, so to speak, and and either you have to spend a lot of money to re-drill the well deeper, or you let it go, and we're going to buy more water from Fort Worth. That's a business case. We're going to go through and make a business case. We could also have groundwater contamination. I'm told by Mike that our Trinity wells are very high in chlorides, and that in fact, when they put that on the golf course, it creates problems for killing the grass, just too high in salinity. So, in my mind, the real answer to the question that I don't know, it's more of a statement than a question, is that, I think we ought to go back and revisit our water plan every 5 years. And a big part of that is to say, let's make sure we're using realistic assumptions. I support using realistic but conservative assumptions. We don't need to, if we need 100 gallons, we don't need to have 100.5 gallons of capacity. A little bit of extra is good. If we look at our wastewater plant, we have 4 trains that will handle the capacity of the permit, and we have 1 additional train in case there's a problem with one of them. We have some resiliency in the system. The additional water line out to Fort Worth, we've already made a partial investment in that. I think we're going to need it someday. I think we ought to reconsider the alignment. It doesn't make sense to me to put our only two pipelines for water supply in the same alignment, where if one of them breaks, it's likely to break the other one. If we could get them separated a little bit in the plan, that would, or at least considered, and the next time that plan is updated, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I guess I heard you say a lot. I guess I've never heard, I know that study says we're going to be off. It's based on what you know of our groundwater supply, the well supply. Does it seem to necessitate that we need to get off it by 2022?
No, I'm not going to recommend that, no. Mike?
If I may, the driver behind that was, so the last time we did our Trinity well, which is about 1,800 feet deep now, we had to drop the pump about 200 feet to keep enough water above the pump. 2 of our wells, we have throttling valves on. If we didn't have throttling valves on them, basically to choke them down, so they're not just pumping freely, we would actually pump them dry. So, and this has happened over, several years, probably over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen these things happening. So when we went out and did our plan, we were like, okay, well, maybe, if this continues to go like this, one of these days we'll probably be off groundwater.
Yep. But
Okay.
along that same line, there's not been any study accomplished by the MUD related to that, correct? Has the MUD ever engaged an engineer to go out and evaluate the wells and production out of those wells?
I don't believe so, other than just the in-house data we have.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead. I have some points, but go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my only thing is, if we're going to be making $1 million decisions, that our decisions shouldn't be based on fog, prophecy, hearsay, opinion, and guess. And to just set an arbitrary date of 2022 without some study to justify that, to me seems like, when you talk about planning, probably not the most appropriate thing to do. One of the other questions, in the report, it states that during peak hour, the east tank would get down below 33%. I know at last meeting, and so I'm not quoting you on it, but I am. But I asked you just, where does the east, like all of last year, where did it set? And I think you said the lowest it got was maybe 50%. Hopefully I'm not misquoting you. And so my thing is, here in the report is estimating it's going to be down below 30%. it's sitting at 50%. Again, it's just, I think we made decisions based on guesstimates, and when we look at the reality, we're finding out the reality does not equal the guesstimates.
Could I ask you another question?
Sure.
You mentioned 2.15 per household, and, I mean, I've always heard, and Bill, you could probably back it up, but it's more like 2.5 to 2.8. AWWA, as recent as 2016, it says residential indoor water use in single-family homes has decreased, yes, but the average household daily water use has decreased 22%, and it's at 2.77. So,
I'm going off what's in the study. In the study, it says currently it was 2.15 at the time the study was done.
but that's before hotels, and another thing you're doing per household. We have hotels now, we have businesses as far as restaurants, breadwinners, we have the new restaurant coming in, and then you got PD 30, which, yes, there will be less irrigation water, but you have businesses mixed in there too.
And what I'm suggesting, what my ultimate point would be, I'm not saying that I disagree with Carmen. What I'm saying is, I think when we look at the study and we look at the assumptions were made, and now we have the benefit of 2 or 3 years of reality, we find the assumptions overestimated the amount of water that would be used. And therefore, I question the recommendations. And so my contention would be, we need a new study as we get to the point, because now, if there's only 50 lots, we're sitting at 4,700, we're at 1%. So there's not gonna be anything that's gonna swing the needle that is gonna cause, rather than having assumptions, we just simply look at reality, because the reality is here, we're at build out. Unless we go out and annex something else, or the land fairies show up and grants us some more land, we don't have to assume anything, because it's all gone. It's all consumed. It's all being used. So we can actually take what we actually have and use real numbers and then make a decision. And if it comes out that we need to do certain things, then I'm comfortable with that. But I have a real concern with making $1 million decisions on a study that, when we have now the benefit of time, now granted, they didn't have a crystal ball to see what 2018 was going to look like, but when we know what 2018 looks like now, we compare the study, what they estimated was going to happen, to the reality of the situation, we find there was some overestimation done.
I understand what you're saying.
Greg, I think Carmen's saying the same thing that you're saying. If I understood you right, you said you're not making any recommendations tonight that we spend money. And,
Well,
then you said
Other than
that,
the line going down 114.
except the line went down 140. And then you also said that we need at least every 5 years to look at this. Well, we're 3 years into this thing, probably a year out from now, we're gonna have to do this again, and then we'll know.
Yeah,
Then we're gonna know.
What I guess my point of, I wouldn't say contention, or he said do we need, as far as it relates to the line from Westlake to here at $14 million in the ground storage tank, he said yes, based on the assumptions. And what I'm pointing out is those assumptions are incorrect. Therefore, I think the ultimate result you get to will be different.
Oh, I think you need a new
Yeah,
study.
and
I
again-
don't disagree with it at all.
Again, you're looking at, okay, how much is needed, not, compensating for dry years or something like that, where, I mean, you're saying, okay, right now, everyone's I use 2,000 a month. Does Breadwinners use 2,000? I don't think so. Does a hotel use 2,000? No. But you're saying that's the same connection. Another thing is, during the dry months, you have people using 40, 60, 90,000, gallons a month. So that, you can't just turn a faucet on and make more water appear.
No. What I'm saying is this, and that's the great thing about what I did. I didn't assume anything. I simply looked at the reports that we have, and this is from what's in our packet, and looked at each year. Our high year was 2011, and I looked at each year afterwards. We used more water that year than we have since, even though our population has gone up 33%. And the point I'm trying to make is, that's not an assumption. Our per capita water use has dropped. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. And this study, as he said, is based on our per capita water use staying the same or going up. And so if the study assumes it's going up, but our actual usage is going down, there's a delta there. If we're making $1 million decisions, I think before we make any more decisions, we need to commission a new water study so we can make a
Well,
decision
yeah,
based on
that's a
real
board
number.
decision, and I probably won't be affected by it or part of it.
And
So,
the
I
last
mean,
thing I'll say, then I'll yield to Mr. Rose. I've heard 1,000,000 times cost is not in the study. If you go to page 38, the line that we're discussing, that improved from pump station to East Tank was estimated 2.1 million, and the latest quote we have is 5.3. So it's 2.5 times the number, which again goes to the other concern is if you use the same math and look at that $14 million line at 2.5 times, that's $35 million. So my point that I made to anyone that ever questioned why does Greg keep voting no on the East Tank, that's the reason why. Because when I look at what actually has happened versus what the study estimated would happen, the study consistently overestimated. Therefore, I think it's making recommendations to do things that are not potentially needed because it's overestimating.
But the fact is, Mike keeps trying to catch up on heavy usage days to keep that east tank full, which equates to gravity or pressure in water. Is that correct, Mike?
I would agree, that's a problem. But the question is it a $5.3 million problem?
Well, if you live on the east side and you have a fire in your house, I guess that could be a $400,000 or $500,000 problem for that person. Director Rose?
I think I had three things, but I've probably forgotten two of them as the conversation continued
I
over here.
apologize for mimicking you, Director Rose.
Okay, so, yeah. So in one way to support what you're saying, I discovered in the review of the Water Smart packet, a gallon per capita per day amount that went into that chart. And we have a study that's based on, I think you said 287.
That's the number I've got written down.
Okay,
so.
287. I think, anyway, I was looking at 267. 287 is fine. That number in the original proposal was higher than that, and it was reduced. But anyway, as I was saying, we have a gallon per capita per day, and that gallonage for including irrigation and commercial for 2016 is not 287, it's 212. And for 2017, it's not 287, it's 187. So the use per capita, however that's calculated, if it's calculated the same, has drastically gone down. The other thing I wanted to mention is you've talked about the cost of the project. As I was reviewing some prior slides, I think it was probably the first set of slides that Gil presented to the group. And on one of those slides, it talks about the line going to the east tank, and it says $5.3 million worst case. Now, what happened in the discussions after that point that price went down, I have absolutely no idea. To the point of another study, I think so. I've had issues with this study for a lot of reasons, and it's why I went from populations to connections in the work that I did. But I concur. Now, as to the current project, I had, as you're probably, and everyone sitting here is aware, I've had real problems with this hydraulic analysis. One, I don't support the fact that it arbitrarily says the wells are going away on a certain date. I have nothing to validate that necessary action that I've seen at the board. The additional storage tank, I think that the saying that we need a 24-hour standby capacity for our max use day is an overstatement. Another thing that's in that, because another thing it says in that study is an assumption that you can't impact the water use in the town in less than 24 to 48 hours. Had a previous general manager tell me that. Felt that, and the position was that if we went and put up signage and did notification, everyone in this town was going to continue their usage. I don't buy that assumption. I believe that people will cut their use, and if you're looking at how much water you need to have in a storage tank, you will take the winter averaging amounts and then blend down a portion of a percentage of an irrigation on a max use day, and that's what you're looking at. You also have to maintain your fire reserve requirements in that computation. So when I looked at the study, as I've said, I've had lots of problems with that study, but when I got this data, this page right here from Water Superintendent, and it shows that with all those pumps running, I'm not maintaining my level because that water is going to users on the way to the tank, and that tank level is decreasing. To me, in my aviation background, that's a yellow light that just come on the flight engineer's panel. This is a situation that I must resolve one way or another because I cannot allow a continuing decrease like that. This piece of paper right here is what I base my determination to press forward with that tank and that line, or that line to that tank. This is it. This to me, in our background, this is a hydraulic system that rather than 3,000 plus or minus 50 on our 135 is reading 2,700. I'm going to take it home, I'm going to write it up, and I'm going to let the crew chief fix it. That's where I'm at on this. It's got to be fixed. That's me.
Could you put that Seattle chart back up for a minute? I want to ask you a question about Fort Worth as it relates to Seattle.
Okay, well, let's see.
You notice that red line down at the bottom of the Seattle chart was amazing to me, that the actual water requirement versus the forecast was so low. But I've lived in Seattle, and they don't have droughts in Seattle. So did you try to forecast the impact of the potential of having a drought? Because that was really the story in 2011. We had a drought in 2011. We had a drought in the whole first 10 years of the century, but particularly got acute in 2011. So did you in Fort Worth try to recognize that you have to compensate in your forecasting by allowing for the fact that in Texas, North Texas, we have droughts, and they're going to affect that red line?
Well, let me answer that in maybe a slightly different way. I spent 40 years in Utah, which is the second driest state in the nation, and they spend a lot of money moving water around from the Colorado River, actually, with tunnels and trans-basin diversions just to get water over to the Wasatch Front. I presume you've been through Salt Lake Valley. A lot of the water coming to the Salt Lake Valley is from the Colorado River, so it's an out-of-basin transfer. The truth is they have a really arid climate, so it's very dry. The atmosphere is dry. And when they go to water grass, they have plenty of nice green grass there. It evaporates because the air is very dry. North Texas, average rainfall about 35 inches. One of the biggest droughts in recent history had happened just before I got here. I showed up and I think I started April 6th, and at the end of 2015 it was the wettest year on record. So there were people who argued that I had devastated water revenue that year, and I did a little bit, because that's the flip side of it. If it's falling out of the sky, people aren't watering. That's the truth of it. So 35 inches a year. If you go from the west side of Fort Worth to the east side of Dallas, there's a significant change in annual precipitation just across that 2-hour drive. There's just kind of this weird slot, and then out to the west, it's much more arid out in the West Texas area, where Buster, my old wastewater plant superintendent out at Fort Worth, said, "Yeah, you can see your dog running away from home for 3 days out there." So it's dry and pretty flat. But 35 inches a year here in Fort Worth. Raleigh, North Carolina was 43 inches a year. I got there in 2010. 2008 was their drought of record, in which only 38 inches of water fell out of the sky. So their drought of record had 3 inches more water than we had in Fort Worth on average year. So all of those things get played out in the planning process. So there's really two pieces to it. One's to get enough raw material to treat and deliver to people. The other is to put infrastructure in the ground big enough to move the maximum amount of water to the users under the driest conditions, which means that most of the time water treatment plants, pipes are not at full capacity. It's really those maximum drought years where you hit the capacity. On the flip side, there's a statewide water plan, and the statewide water plan gets submitted to the state. There's an actual incentive in that process to overestimate future demands. So when Fort Worth puts their stuff into the Regency water plan, they come around, they ask everybody, including us, what does our water supply plan look like going forward? Because they're providing us at least 90% of our water. And they dutifully put that in the plan. They don't say that's a bad assumption. They ask us what we want to put in there, and we put it in there, which leads to things like Dalworthington Gardens, which is a little island inside of the city of Arlington, completely built out, has been for years. It's served by Fort Worth. They're predicting that their water use is going to double by 2060. Double by 2060. And it's in the Regency water plan. Also in the water plan is an assumption that we're going to get some of our future water supply for all those millions of more people moving to Texas, and particularly the DFW, through conservation. So it goes back to what you're talking about, is conservation becomes a water resource of the future. We're just going to drive down per capita consumption. So, really, the objection that I have to the way Bill went around looking at those numbers is that they're snapshots. And so it's really the difference between an audit and a future planning document, right? When you're looking back, where are we right now? That's not really a good basis for a conservative plan. Are some of the assumptions in this existing plan easy to question? Yes, I would say there's several of them that could be reconsidered the next time I go through that water plan. But it's part and parcel of conservatism in design and conservatism in plan writing that comes out of engineering. We don't, so here's an example. There's three kinds of people in this world, right? There's people that see the glass as half full. There's people that see the glass as half empty. And there are engineers who see the glass as perfectly designed with a factor of safety of 1.
What about the people who don't see the glass?
Anyway, I
Okay.
don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah.
It certainly does get considered, the drought sort of scenarios. But the truth is, when it comes down to executing, like Greg says, you're going to spend a lot of money. You do need to look at what's going on right now. The Eagle Mountain plant expansion has been in the Regency water plan for its last 2 iterations. And before I left, it had slipped off the 10-year conveyor belt, and it was out past year 10. And Fort Worth is still growing. We're in a different space because we're near build-out. And it's unlikely, even if they were to tear down some homes and build some higher density things, that the per capita usage would be linear in expansion, right? If Dalworthington Gardens got bulldozed and they went up 2 stories or 3, it's not going to triple their water use. It's not. It's a much lower slope.
Okay, do you have one more item to address, or?
No, sir. I was
On
just trying to
B.
answer any questions that folks might have or
No,
catch
B
some
was me.
tomatoes.
Okay, so all A and B have all been
think it's
addressed to
complete.
satisfaction of the directors? Okay. Okay, we're not doing anything on this as far as any action, is that correct? It's just informational? Everybody agree? Okay. Moving on to 5, consider and take appropriate action regarding wastewater treatment plant improvement project. A, consider and take appropriate action regarding approval of change order number 10R from Weber Cadagua Partners in an amount of $266.44 for wastewater treatment plant improvement project. And B, consider and take appropriate action regarding approval of change order number 11R from Weber Cadagua Partners in an amount of $64,741 for the wastewater treatment plant improvement project.
Am I reading that, is that intended to say $266.44?
Yes, sir. So, and I would add that item number 6 is intended to give me the authority to approve a $266 change order,
Yes.
which I do not know that I have right now.
Right.
Staff is aware of both of these and supports them both. I would tell you that the one for $266.44 has not been signed by Weber Cadagua. It relates to painting the handicap stripe in the parking lot outside of Carl's office. They went to the RS means, which is in the contract as the way to settle a difference of perspective over cost. Weber was saying that that's a $2,000 change order and have refused to sign it, but there's a provision in the contract that allows us to make it so, as is. So we're asking for approval on that one. And then on item B, those were some electrical improvements, some conduits and other things that were simply omitted from the design, and it's a change order that the staff supports here at the end of the contract to get that done.
Okay, I'm gonna put my 2 cents in, and I'm not in favor of these change orders, you know, and this is the reason why. The electrical, it was a design error as far as, okay, demolish electrical engineering, thought, or let's see, demolished and electrical engineering, this lift station was to be included in demolition and did not tie into the new electrical. It's like, guess what, the lift station's gonna need power, you know, so I'm not in favor for that. The meter, next one, this is on page 37, by the way, the golf course meters. These meters are tied into the current UV electrical, and this was not known at the time of design. The change order is to tie the electrical in for these meters. They were tied in to start off with, and they're not going anywhere. Why wouldn't we tie them in, you know, when the new plant gets operational? The electrical, this is the COP25 UV system power. Again, it had power when the project started, and it should have power when it's completed. So I'm not in favor myself. That's my 2 cents worth.
So I'm sorry, Tony.
Just a comment question. I think your point's well taken, but for purposes of the consideration of the change orders, whether or not it's necessary to go forward with the project, whether the design engineer has some responsibility, to me is a separate question, and you may want to speak to the engineer about that, but if it's necessary for the project, it's necessary.
Well, I'm not in favor of it for both what you said. To me, the engineer should be paying these costs, not us. It's in this whole project, it's like we've been just writing blank checks. I understand what you're saying for the project to continue with electric being wired, but we should seek, I guess, money from the engineer, reimbursement from the engineer for these costs, because that's a flaw in their design. They were out there plenty of times.
Absolutely agree,
And
but I guess I'm not sure if
I know what you're saying, but I have to make a statement somewhere.
Okay.
And that's my statement, is I don't think, I know that these things have to be approved for it to continue on, but I'm not sitting there with a blank checkbook, and every time, you know, an engineer has to argue with the contractor, or something was not designed correctly, or even on the other side of the coin, the contractor screws something up. The residents or the customers of our district shouldn't be sitting there and go, we got your back. How much is it? And that's what's been going on. And, you know, it might be that I'm leaving in May, but I'm just tired of it, to be honest with you, you know.
I have a question. What has been CPNY's response to these oversights, specifically to this oversight?
It's an omission, so it's not a design flaw from my perspective. So there is no perfect design. I'll repeat, there is no perfect design, except for one that doesn't get built. So if you do a design and you put it on the shelf and you don't construct it, it's perfect because you never find anything that's been omitted or flaws or what have you. This started out a little over $100,000. So it's been negotiated down with the contractor and the engineer working actively to get these improvements down to the 64,000. Again, I support the approval of this change order and feel like there is an omission from the original design. That happens. I mean, it does happen. Things get omitted.
And that's what the contingency is for. But if the thing had power to start off with, it needs power when you get done the project. That's engineering 101. Okay, if you have a plug into the wall to start off with and you're not changing, at the end of the project, that plug should still go into the wall. And I said my 2 cents, so anybody else have anything?
Well, I agree on the, you would look at something like that and say that would come out of the contingency, as I would look at it. And I don't think there's any contingency left. So the next question is, we're talking about power going someplace and changing the source of that power, as I understand it. So if we take the president's mode and say, not going to do it, not going to do this, will those same pieces still have power, or what are we doing to the project if we say we're not going to do this?
It's not going to be completed. That's really where we're at. So
Okay.
This is another one where Weber Cadagua has refused to sign it. We feel like the price is right, but they had requested, in addition to these improvements, another 35, 40 days on the day part of the contract, so a time extension. They're already at approximately 205 days into the liquidated damages provision. So they can not sign it, which is what they're doing, but so it's like not signing in protest. But the contract has a mechanism which can force them to do it, whether they agree with the price or the day's extension or not.
On this lift station, from what I remember, and I might be wrong, but there's supposed to be a second lift station put in. Is that correct?
It's been a month since I looked at the details on this one, so.
Do you remember, Mike?
No, they were gonna redo the original lift station, and then I think when we got the price of the whole project in, we actually did not move forward with that. We took that part out of the contract.
But there were supposed to be two at the end. I think the original filter lift station, then one next to it. And so now that's been taken out, and I said my piece. I'm not gonna delay it.
I'd like to have an hour dissertation on the $266.44 to be consistent with previous board behavior on items such as this.
You want to put a tree in there too?
Yes, let's put a
Do you need
tree in there, live oak.
Would you like to make a motion?
Okay,
Or I'll make a motion.
sure.
I guess we probably do these separately.
It said let's do them together. Let somebody vote down.
Okay. You want to do them together?
I say let's do them together.
Okay. I move to approve change order number 10R from Weber Cadagua Partners in the amount of $266.44. And also change order number 11R from Weber Cadagua Partners in an amount of $64,741 for the waste treatment plant improvement project.
Okay, I have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose to approve the 266.44 and the 64,741 on change orders 10R for the 266.44 and the 64,741 for change order number 11R. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Vice President Wilson. Further discussion? I see none. All in favor of these change orders, 5A and B, as the motion said, show of hands. I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, and Vice President Wilson. All opposed is myself. Change orders pass. Okay,
Can I take a 5-minute break?
how about 3 minutes? We're negotiating.
Take 3.
No, come back at, we're gonna take recess at 8:48 and return at 9:05, we'll say? Is that okay?
Yeah.
9:05. 9:03, Miguel, you ready? Okay, it's 9:03, we're coming back from recess into regular meeting, and we were on item number 6, is that correct, Vice President
Yes.
Wilson? Okay. Consider and take appropriate action regarding adoption of resolution number 2018-0220, authorizing the general,
Manager. So
the general?
The general.
Yeah,
Is that like that
General.
commercial, the general?
just a typo.
Okay.
Stick
To
with it.
approve,
Keep
general
going.
manager to approve construction contract change orders.
Yeah, the general.
And I have to
Takes
plead
months, but we had a
guilty
version
because I
control.
actually saw it on the draft and failed to push it forward, so I'm
Come on,
going.
people.
I went, somebody will catch that.
Yeah, for some reason, okay. Do I hear a motion? Anyone?
I assume what you're talking about there, Carmen, is like this change order we just voted on the previous item.
266, or for example, there's contingency in the Phoenix and Indian Creek project. So something comes up or it's an unforeseen condition or what have you that costs a little bit more in the change order to the contractor. And it's within my spending authority up to, I think it was 50 in this item, and it's budgeted as a contingency. for the-
50,000?
Yeah.
I think it's what's in the
2A
in the
is
policy.
50,000.
So,
$50,000 or 25% of the total
Right.
contract.
right. But I couldn't have approved number B, 5B, for example. So that would not be permitted were this policy in place.
Because it did not have the engineers.
Okay, still waiting for a motion.
I want to talk about it.
Okay, talk away.
Yeah, and I don't want to cut it short. I have a little bit of a problem with it. And I think my problem, one, is due, and I understand, because I pulled out the water statutes and read it, and it is right out of statutes for the amounts. The thing that I have about it is if there's something, if there is a change order that comes up, we have the ability to meet and discuss it in 72 hours. If there's an emergency situation, and I don't know how a change order would tie into that, but if there's an emergency situation, we can actually meet in about 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours. I can't remember exactly what it is. So I'm struggling here to see, one, the necessity, and if there is a necessity, then I seriously struggle with the amounts that are involved. I don't want to say that, it's not, to me, it's not a trust issue, it's an authority and responsibility. I can delegate the authority, but I ultimately have the responsibility for what transacts. And a lot of this, it's just keeping my hands involved in what's going on. So when I look at 25% of the wastewater treatment plant,
That's, so
I
it wouldn't be
flinched.
So it wouldn't be 25% of the wastewater treatment plant. It would be 25%, but not to exceed $50,000. So the contract could be for $3 billion. He could only approve up to 25%, up to $50,000. So it would have to be a $200,000 project.
It's 50 per change order.
It's 50 per change order, aggregate not to exceed. So he would have ultimately the authority, I'm not gonna drive a worst case scenario, but you could stack $50,000 different change orders, and it's specifically addressed that they won't be subdivided to meet it. But you could stack them up for, what, $3.5 million? And that, I mean, I flinched. So I need to understand the need, the necessity. If it is only to take workload off the board, hey,
An example is what we discussed earlier, they wouldn't even have to come back to the board on the tree issue. because that would be a change order.
Don't say that. I vote for
I
it,
told you,
just based
I
on that.
told you I'd throw a tree in there, but is that correct, Tony? Is like, because,
I think
I mean, I'm with,
trust
you
is
know,
the right
Bill
word,
on this, but,
to me, there's necessarily some discretion and judgment by the general manager if he was given this authority. And to the extent anything is that the change order relates to a matter of public interest, I would expect him to bring it back to the
right,
board.
but technically, he can go ahead
He
and
wouldn't
approve.
have to.
Technically, he could do so.
Yeah, okay, that's what my point being. Okay, any other discussion before a motion is made or not made? Jim, you have anything? Jim? Okay, I'll entertain a motion or no motion. I mean, any motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion,
So your motion is
my
to,
motion is to, allow the general manager to approve construction contract change orders up to his $50,000 limit.
and that's resolution number 2018-0220A.
Right.
Okay, I have a motion by Director Hayes. Is there a second?
I'm going to second it because I need to understand what he's proposed. Now, are you saying, what, I don't understand exactly, are you proposing an amendment here to this particular document, or?
He's saying to
No,
approve
he
the
approved- He
resolution.
said approve this resolution. He gave the resolution number.
The resolution gives the general manager
I got you.
authority.
Okay, I got you.
So-
Okay,
You made a second to it?
yeah,
Okay.
we're in discussion.
Any other discussion? I see none. All in favor of approving Resolution 2018-220A? Show of hands. Okay, I have Director Hayes and Director Thomas for, all opposed. I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, myself, and Vice President Wilson, so it fails. Okay, moving on.
So it passed, did you say?
No, it
No,
failed.
it failed.
Yeah,
It was
okay.
2-3 vote. And, you know, just, I hate voting no for things, but it was along the same lines as Secretary Treasurer Rose said, that we are directors on this board and we're ultimately responsible for the money expended and what goes on. So that's my point there. Do you want to make any comment?
I mean, my thing would have been if it was up to $50,000 or 25% of the contract, but the 50,000 was the max. I probably would have been comfortable with that, but not $50,000 per change order, where if you look at it, a project over 3 or 4 years, you could be at hundreds of thousands of dollars and the board would possibly never see it. Not
Okay.
comfortable with that.
Okay, so we still have we're still within that item. So if you want to make a motion and amend what's here, you may do that.
Okay, I'd make a motion that we modify this resolution, but it's 25% of the contract or $50,000, period, on that particular contract.
For a change order.
Not
Whichever.
per change order, per contract,
In the aggregate.
in the aggregate.
Okay, do I have a second to that
Yeah,
amendment?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second by Director Hayes. Any further discussion?
Okay, so I want to be clear on it. So what we're doing is we're changing B to read, the aggregate of the change orders approved by the general manager may not exceed $50,000.
25%, didn't you say?
Well,
So it would be, it cannot exceed
got to get the verbiage.
25% of the contract or $50,000. So for example, the wastewater treatment plant, he could approve up to 25% of the contract or $50,000,
I think you'd say whichever is less.
or whichever's less.
Yeah. that
You understand that,
clarifies
Jim?
it.
Yeah.
Okay, second understands it. So there's a new motion by
Does that
Vice
make
President
sense, Bill?
Wilson.
It's whichever is
Less.
less. 25% of the contract price,
Or $50,000.
$50,000, whichever is less.
Correct.
Okay, now, is he limited to one time or as many times?
This
What would be
resolution is every one of them. It's just not a specific,
Okay, so if you change B, then
Contingency budget in there.
I'm not clear on the verbiage.
So he
Okay.
could,
I understand the concept, but I'm not, we've got to have the verbiage correct. Okay, so if we want to wrestle with it now, we could wrestle with it now, or we could table it and bring it back at the next meeting with corrected verbiage.
Why don't we bring it back to you? I think it's clear what the intention of the motion is, and we'll.
Okay. I move to table it till the next meeting.
Well, we have a motion and a second on the table right
Yeah,
now.
but you can table anytime.
What?
You can table anytime.
Do you want to bring it back?
I'm fine with bringing it back.
Okay, so you want to take back your motion?
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, you okay, Jim?
Yes.
Okay, that's okay, we're clear, right, Tony? He withdrew his motion. Tony?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
That works
Fine.
too.
Okay, next.
You had a motion to table.
Okay, you gonna make a motion
I
table?
move to table until,
Okay,
to bring
we
it back
have
to the
a
next
motion
meeting.
by Secretary Treasurer Rose to table. I'll second that motion. Anyone have anything else? All in favor? Show of hands. Okay. 6 is table. Come back at the next meeting, okay, Lori? Okay, 7, consider and take appropriate action regarding Resolution 2018-0220, B as in boy, approving the submittal of Water Smart application for inclusion in the Association of Water Board Directors, Water Smart Partners Program.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve Resolution 2018-0220B, approving submittal of Water Smart application.
Okay, we have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose, a second by Director Thomas. Blech. Okay. Any discussion?
Yes. It says for the period of January 1st, 2017 through December 31st, 2017. I think that should be 2018.
Correct.
Because it's only for last year.
But I think your application is for the year that passed to go forward.
Yeah. It's previous year's activities that
Right.
drive the application. And for the record, the resolution talks about we having reviewed the requirements and having reviewed the submission. For the record, I did that this afternoon and find it complies.
Okay, to be honest with you, it still doesn't make sense to me. So if
We're
you're approving
closed.
a Water Smart application, how can you approve it for last year? Because if they're making analysis of water use,
I think we had less than 15% water loss in 2017, therefore we're seeking recognition this year for last year.
oh, so this is recognition, this is not the Water Smart program where we
It's a
send
water-
people out?
No,
and-
no.
Oh, okay. Okay, it makes,
This is when the AWBD being recognized as a water smart in my district.
okay, I'm sorry, I thought this
I
was
did-
the program where we go out and have
Yeah.
them help people conserve water.
I just,
Okay, that-
I just want to make sure we make a note that he just wasted our time.
Trees again.
Okay. Okay. So we have a motion, and who second?
I made the motion.
Okay. Director Thomas second. Motion was made by Secretary Treasurer Rose. Any further discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. All opposed, I see none. Moving on. Okay, number 8, consider and take appropriate action regarding
Fourth Amendment.
approval of the Fourth Amendment to the Water Town/Ground Lease Agreement with New Singular Wireless PCS LLC for the property located at Highway 114 in TW King, Trophy Club, Texas 76262, and authorize the general manager to execute amendment and all related documents. What are we getting for this now? I know this has been on there like 2 or 3 times.
It really boils down to this. They wanted to come in and, do maintenance and upgrades of the antennas on the tank. Amendment number 3 had some very specific, detailed lists of what equipment would be mounted on the tank. And when they were coming in to do this maintenance work and upgrade, there were some additional items to go on the tank. And so I pushed back and said, that seems like you're expanding the equipment on the tank, and we ought to have some consideration around the lease. So we started going back and forth with them last September, October, right after I came. And they finally came back and said, well, we can go up to this number, which is very close to, I've talked with Tom Class and gotten The documents for the lease of the western tank, the revenues from which go to the town. This brings it into line with that revenue stream. So staff recommends approval of this. And
What does this bring the total rental amount to per month?
it's about $1,100. I don't have it. I don't have my board packet open.
Big money, big money.
No, okay.
Right now, we're getting 978 and some cents.
So it'll be 1178.
And what's the
That'd be about
agreement for? How long?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one.
So that's $2,400. That's just enough to buy those trees.
This is just an amendment, I think, to our
Get the crash out.
existing
Yeah, it
agreement.
changes the price. But my question is, on the, when's that tank coming up for paint? It's been like 5 or 6 years, hasn't it, since we signed the tank upgrade?
Yeah, it's been quite a few years. I
It might-
mean, we have our tank,
so-
we actually drain it and let them inspect it every 2 years.
Yeah, so it's coming up on probably paint or something. But on, will they remove the antennas for us to paint it, or do we just paint around it, or?
They're not mounted to the tank, I would say, that close, so they can easily paint around
Paint
it.
around it, okay.
And I think they're taking actually some off. Some of them are being replaced, and the addition I think that they were doing was pretty minimal.
I know AT&T needs to get the antenna somewhere, because on my street, there's nothing. Okay,
I think we ought to approve the Fourth Amendment. So
Well,
the
you making a motion?
22 year-
I'll motion.
okay, we have a motion by
No,
Director
I'll
Rose.
make it. I move to approve the Fourth Amendment to the Water Tower Ground Lease Agreement with New Singular Wireless PCS LLC for property located at Highway 114 and T.W. King Road, known as the East Water Tower, and authorize the general manager to execute the amendment and all related documents.
Okay, we have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose. I'll second that motion. And any further discussion? I hear-
Question, Carmen, how long, what's the length of this agreement?
I don't have the answer to that
Yeah,
question.
he's looking for it.
It's indefinite, I
It's,
think.
yeah, it's
I don't
on
think
the
it's
original.
indefinite.
It's in the master contract.
There's,
This is like the fourth amendment to the master contract.
Is that a game changer for you, Jim?
Automatically renews for
No,
5
I
years.
just want to know what kind of
Yeah,
commitment we
I
are.
think it
Okay,
automatically
can you
renews for
just
5
email
years.
that out?
It's
Okay.
a $200 increase, that's fine if you're looking at
It's
3
not
years.
200, it's,
200 a month.
200 a month.
yeah,
200 a month.
but we already get, what, what do we get now?
978. So he's saying it's 200 a month increase.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
okay. Anyone have any further discussion? I see none, all in favor of the motion, show of hands. Unanimous, all opposed, I see none. Moving on.
Yeah, the key is that this doesn't change the original contract length.
Consider and take appropriate action regarding the January 2018 combined financials and variance report. A, combined financials, B, combined variance.
That was amended.
Do you have something, Tony?
I was just telling him the term of the original lease agreement.
Okay. Did you find it, or?
Yeah, it was a 10-year term with 3 additional 5-year renewal terms. I don't know if in one of the subsequent amendments that also was changed, but that was the
Okay.
term in the original.
Okay. Number 9, I just read. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the combined financials and variance report.
You make a motion to the January?
I move to approve the January 2018 combined financials and variance report.
Okay, I have a
It was a
motion by,
large assumption on my part.
okay, I have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second by Vice President Wilson. Any discussion on A or B?
I do.
Okay,
I'm on the budget variance report, and there's an item.
Page?
I'm on page, very good, 163.
okay.
The dumpster services hauling off the sludge from the wastewater treatment plant, we're at 52.55% of the budgeted amount, and we're 4 months through the year. So I have a little concern about that. I don't have an answer. I just think it deserves highlighting. dumpster services at the wastewater treatment
And
plant.
that's that sludge truck that drives around Trophy Club?
Yep, that's it, goes by your house.
Just want to make sure it's, yeah, it goes by my house every
Oh.
day, I think.
If we had it stop at your yard, I wonder if we could decrease the cost of having the sludge.
Maybe. I have good green grass, so.
Yeah, okay. But
Okay.
anyway, that's all I had.
And I'll make a comment on that. After review with Mr. Rose about it, this last month in January, we did 3 times the average, even taken from last fiscal year. Now, Carl's not here. I was kind of hoping he was here to talk about, but I'm not sure yet if it's something that we're seeing due to construction at the wastewater treatment plant and we're hauling off more as they're taking things apart, the old system. But I talked to Ms. Rose about it. We'll go ahead and review it for next month too and see how we're trending for next month and kind of take it that way.
I mean, the new plant may be more efficient, so we're hauling away more stuff. I got no idea.
There, I would add that there was at least one situation where they were seeding phase 2, which means they're taking active bacterial cultures out of phase 1. And in the process, they pump it to the new basin to kind of get it kick-started. They managed to spill in the soils surrounding the basins. And I asked the engineer to require that they remove that soil. They chose to do it by putting it in the dumpster for hauling away sludges. And we're committed to pay for their share of that disposal. So whether that part has happened yet or not, I don't know. But it was,
Okay.
you know, it could be that was just
There
one
would be
anomaly.
some increase.
But that was in the last 2.5 months that occurred.
Okay.
So we could possibly be getting some of that
A
back.
little bit back, but
Okay, I just, it was a trend that didn't fit what was budgeted, and I thought it was worth,
We can fill your
additional
swimming
emphasis.
pool up, direct the car if you like.
I don't have a pool.
okay, that's all I've got.
I don't have any bathtubs either, but as you can tell. Okay. Have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose. You seconded, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any further discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, any opposed? I see none. Moving on. Okay, reports and updates. General Manager,
You got 4 minutes to get this done.
reports and updates. This is agenda number 10. I'm not going to read all of them, just hit the ones that you need to. I just want to make a comment before we get started. I think I requested an item that addressed the AWBD, so we could update the other directors. And I don't think it's on here. Is that correct?
A 90-minute address?
No, address the AWBD.
you are right. I failed to get that on.
Okay.
That's my mistake.
10 points will be deducted from your total score.
All right.
Okay, go on.
Well, included in your packet.
I do
is-
have my report, it's in my briefcase, and it'll take an hour and a half.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, you can commence after the meeting adjourns.
You can review that after May. Okay. Okay.
I've a written report in your packet. I guess at this point, I want to draw your attention to 2 items. One is the general manager expenditure disbursement and contract policy. So that is in the packet. This is a replacement for a policy that we tabled earlier, but an attempt, work with Tony and I working together to clean it up, make it specifically in compliance with current state law and abbreviate it a little bit. Also, at council's recommendation, the idea was that we'd bring this to you in a report like this, where we're not seeking action, let you have a month to think about it, and then bring it back for action the next time around. So would like you all to take a look at that and see if have any heartburn about it. If you do, send me an email, and we'll make corrections. And
Okay, I'd like to request that you send out this particular document, separate it out, and also the baseline document that you work from.
Okay.
That way I can see what's old, what's new. Jim's not-
The other item, I think, was item C, the May 5th, 2018 election update.
Where's the voting going to be this year?
For May 5th, I believe it'll be at the town hall.
What's the
March
fellow's name
6th.
that shows up here? Which
On
one of
primary
these 3
day.
is the guy that shows up?
Steve.
You know this part, Chap?
No.
Is March 6th early voting?
Early voting starts tomorrow.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Where's that?
Oh, the nearest place is somewhere in Denton.
But that's not
If-
for this election. That's for the two political party election, right? That's not this.
Primaries?
Yeah, the primaries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
primary day is here, but
Yeah.
that's the parties.
Yeah, he asked, but
Early,
where was
early voting.
I don't know where early voting is for the primary.
On the Republican side, it's up in Denton.
I think that's a point of order. That's not under the agenda.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah, well, it was dealing with this. Continue on, Carmen.
That was your point of order.
Mr. President, that's really all I had that I wanted to call out in particular.
Okay, and there was a issue with backup about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months, well, a month and a half ago, I guess. And you're still researching that, is that correct?
Right, you're talking about the Pebble Beach one, where the
Yes.
folks wrote a note to the town's Facebook page?
Yeah, it said that we didn't respond on a Saturday,
Right.
and they didn't call till Sunday, is that correct?
That is correct. We've reviewed the phone logs and submitted the information. We had a discussion with the homeowner, got their receipt for the work and submitted the claim to TML. So they will have a claim adjuster go out and review whether it's a valid claim or not. That should happen fairly quickly. It took me a little longer than it should have to get the phone records back, but we can verify that, in fact, the call did not come in until Sunday. They called their own plumber on Saturday, and it sounds like the plumber came out on Sunday. So, there was an inference in the note written on the town's Facebook page that we had failed to respond for 24 hours, but that was in fact not the case.
Okay, Mike, you got anything going on with water? Any big breaks or?
No, just everything that I'm sure you guys get on your weekly reports and everything. We've got Portland Drive done. We're, after tonight, we're gonna be moving with the 16-inch water line, so
How you doing on meter replacements and?
we're doing good. You guys should be getting those in your weekly reports too. I think we're up to about 75 this year so far, and we've got about 200 to do in total.
Yeah.
I have a question on that. I saw in a packet someplace that said that we were 95% complete on data reading meters. Would that be accurate?
I would say that would be more than accurate. We may be a little bit more than that. So
Okay,
right
great.
now, I think we read, out of our 4,700 meters, we read somewhere around 60 manually now.
The rest of them are all data
Well,
reads.
They're electronic reads. I don't know that they all have, we still do the data head replacements every year too. To where the people that don't have the data log option.
Ones
Well,
can read the log.
This indicated, I'd have to go back and chase it, indicated 95% data log reading capability.
No.
No.
I flinched when I saw
RF.
it. Okay, never mind.
RF capability, right? Is the high 90s?
I would say we're probably pushing 90%,
Yeah,
On
but
the-
data
On the
log.
data log?
probably.
Great. In the report that we received, the high service booster pump,
Mm-hmm.
this seems to be the continuing saga of, if I misunderstood what's transpiring here, this is taking a lot longer than anticipated. This is about the electronics and all of the power feeds and all that change?
So we went
I
out
touched
for bid
it.
for this. We
I'm
got our
sorry.
bids back. The bids were quite a bit higher than we had budgeted for and even anticipated coming back for. A lot of it was, a lot of the contractors and the pump manufacturer, they were putting in a lot of, lead time and delays in there because they were coming back and saying, well, okay, we're not gonna get this pump and motor in for around 20 weeks. And so they were putting a lot of contingency in there for delays. Now coming back, it looks like they can loosen up the specs a little bit and maybe get it a lot faster. So the engineers are renewing this information and are reviewing it. And I think once they're done reviewing it and talking to the contractor, they're gonna come back and talk to us.
Are we gonna have to rebid, are we gonna have to go back and rebid?
We may, so here's where we are on that. We had a successful low bidder, but that number was well in excess of our budgeted amount. They've gone back and started talking with that contractor about ways to reduce the price. It's last I heard in talking to Kevin and their electrical engineering team, that they had worked out a way to move the number down, like let's say $75,000. It was in that range, which is still well in excess of our budgeted amount. But to do it without creating an opening for a claim by one of the other bidders, you have to effectively issue the contract for the full original bid amount with an immediate change order to reduce it. So,
Okay.
to keep it fair and above board. So Kevin said they're in the midst of having that discussion, and we should have something to consider for the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Carl, you got anything going on at the treatment plant? Working good, or?
Right now, or?
How's I working for you this evening?
We've got plenty of water right now. It's finally started slowing down. It's ran now about, the highest was 1,900 gallons. Our limit's 2,400. It actually slowed down within, I guess, 4 hours. It's been running for 4 hours, that kind of flow through there. We had issues with MBR 1, 2, 5, and 6.
Oh, jeez.
Getting close to overflowing.
Any left?
Any left?
Anybody else left? 1, 2, 5,
That's all the
and
basins
6?
in service.
It's everything in service right now, yes. They're working on doing number 4 right now, and, 3 right now, but they haven't poured the concrete yet or put anything in it yet.
Okay, so with this situation, is there any place that you can take the excess and put it until you can get it in and process it?
No,
Thank you.
water in, water in.
Water in, water out.
The website analytics, I didn't see that one page on there again this month. So it's a,
Really? I thought it was there.
what page is it called?
It's down at the bottom of the report.
Is the service, like, is that the 10th one?
It didn't show up on the report.
It did?
Yeah.
He said it.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
What page?
Page
The one
180.
with the,
Information, yeah, the ones we were
180?
mandated to post the information
It's not even
on your readings, Carl?
Yeah, it's not.
I'm sorry?
did you actually
Oh.
get somebody to look at it?
No,
Okay.
I'm just making a point. It's still not there.
What's not there?
Nothing, don't worry about it.
Oh,
The settlement on the,
That nobody's gone to look at it.
yeah, that's exactly right.
So, no, we agree.
That's the answer I'm looking for. Okay. Anybody have anything else?
I think we ought to direct staff to go out and look at it once a day.
Yeah, at least hit it. And staff levels, Renee's been gone. How are we doing on staff levels?
Where are you at? I'm not sure what,
I'm nowhere. I'm
He's
just
nowhere.
asking a question.
He's out, he's just out in the weeds.
yeah,
Yeah, you off agenda,
Huh?
off agenda.
It's a
There's
general
not-
manager report. I'm just
Oh, there's
asking a
staff levels
question.
on there?
We're working through the classification compensation study that we talked about here a little while back, and we've hired, I know you introduced me to somebody new since the last time, right, Stephen? We've got, was
The last gentleman was hired in the water department.
in the water department, that gentleman.
Is that Jordan?
No, Frank.
Oh, Frank.
So,
You guys know who's working here or what?
I get
So
too
they-
many new guys.
They introduced Mike to him last week.
I have been, working on and thinking about economies of scale for operating water and wastewater utilities. And I think as we talk about build-out and all of the stuff that happened when the PID came along, we haven't really expanded staff of the MUD. It's been pretty flat.
We have the same number head count of pretty much when I joined the board.
We have
Is that
that.
correct?
No, we've
We actually have one less technically.
Yeah, one less. So, I mean, that's a testament on efficiency and, whether they're overworked or what, but, I mean, I know the town, to compare it, they've gone up at least 3 or 4 times.
That's what I was gonna say. In 2000, when I came on the board, I think we had 15 or 17 MUD employees. We had the same number in the town.
Yeah,
Now they have, I don't know how many, 70, 80, something.
I don't know.
I'm concerned about productivity.
Excuse me?
I'm concerned about productivity.
Well, that's why I was asking staff. Now you're off record, you're off the agenda there. Okay. Okay. I think we're
I'm concerned
done
about
beating this thing,
adjourning.
yeah. Okay, there is no executive session. We'll skip that unless someone wants to go in for anything.
There was going to be one, but we didn't get it coordinated properly, and so it can slip until next time.
Okay.
If anyone needed a piece of chocolate on their way out, they certainly can come get one.
Jim Thomas. You hear that, Jimmy? Offered to open that door for you.
I wanna die.
You got deep pocket, you
I'm
got
gonna
your
die.
vest on? Okay. Okay, 12, consider and take appropriate actions on matters of deliberated in executive session. We didn't have any. 13, items for future agendas. We already talked about the one that we tabled. You have that one, right?
Right.
8 WBD update. Anybody else have anything else?
Yep.
Come
Phoenix-
back on the tree.
Phoenix and Indian Creek tree replacement.
Excuse me?
Phoenix and Indian Creek tree
Yeah,
replacement.
I did. Okay. Anything else?
And that discussion prohibits any directors talking about trees. Just how much we're gonna pay.
Is that a
for it.
motion or?
It's a motion.
Yeah.
We will
Okay.
not discuss trees and the validity of them, of the root length. or any
Okay.
of that stuff.
Maybe we can put it on the consent
Hey,
agenda.
what's your problem?
He doesn't like trees.
He wants to go home.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't want to see.
Secretary Treasurer wants to be handcuffed to him. You don't like him. That's it. Okay, 14, set future meeting dates, regular board meeting, March 20th, 2018 at 6:30. Anyone have any problem with that?
Negative.
Anyone? Nothing? Okay. Okay, adjourn, motion?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, a motion by Secretary Rose, I'll second it. All in favor, show of hands.
Hey.
Unanimous, all opposed, none. We adjourn at 9:39.
39.
That sounds good. 9:39.
Carl, I want you to think about umbrellas. We need to keep the water out of those
Yep.
basins.
How's that grandbaby?
Hi, Lori.